Good, you?
How's the honeymoon going?
I can't complain.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's good.
Yeah.
Is your wife coming tonight?
No, she's fixing dinner for 2 boys.
Oh, and then she got to fly out somewhere.
She's flying out.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah.
All right, good stuff.
Yeah.
Hopefully have a good crowd tonight.
I hope so.
Yeah, that'd be good. Have some good dialogue.
Yeah. We got a couple more coming in.
Well, we'll get started. We'll
Okay.
start the meeting, get it started.
All right. All right, I'd like to call the town hall meeting to, to order. I show the date, February 6, 2024 at 6 p.m. I show we have a full quorum. The only one we're missing, I believe, is Bob Markleese. He's out of town. I'm not sure if he's participating or not. I don't believe he is. Few ground rules. We're going to have a presentation, well, should do ground rules
No,
or
just
the
do adoption.
agenda?
Just
Okay,
do-
so we're going to go right into, I need a motion to adopt the agenda.
So moved.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes. We're going to do the presentation of the 2024 general obligation bond referendum. Jamie's going to do that. I would ask that you hold all your questions. It's a lot easier to get through the presentation. We've done a number of these, and it's a lot easier. Allow Jamie to get through that. Hold your questions. We'll have plenty of times for questions for all of that. Please be respectful. We want to keep this in order. I hope I don't have to use this at all again. So hopefully it'll be fairly civil with the questions and answers. And Kim, you wanted to say something.
Yeah, there's a sign-in sheet going around. The sign-in sheet is not to speak. It is just to sign in that you are here with your email address so we can email you the presentation out afterwards. Once we get through the entire presentation, we will, raise your hand, ask questions. We will stay here all night to answer all of your questions to make sure that I'll stay here, Wayne Mole, I'll stay here all night to answer all of your questions to make sure that they are sufficiently answered.
And I'm driving her, so I guess
So
I'm
he has to stay
staying
too, so.
All right, Jamie, take it away, please.
Well, I want to thank everyone for coming out tonight. This is a pleasant turnout. Usually when we have town hall meetings, for some reason, for as much communications we put out there and for all the invites that we do, we're lacking stuff. So the most turnout we can get is great, especially for this because, again, we respect your vote, yes or no. However, we just want your vote to be an informed vote instead of something that you might hear or go through on social media. So I'm going to go through the presentation here. Here's the agenda. At the very end of this, again, there's a time where we'll address all the questions, any questions that anybody might have. But if you could just hold those to the very end. Bond facts, what are the different mechanisms of financing available for municipalities and how are they repaid? There are several different bonds that are out there. The one that represents what we're trying to do is more of the general obligation bond is through the increase of property taxes. What is a bond referendum? It's basically a way to raise funds through the sale of bonds, and it's for long-term borrowing. We put this on for it to be voted on March 5th. The reason for that is we have the primary, presidential primary, and we wanted to get as many voters out as we possibly could, so we chose to do the March 5th. Why is the village seeking to fund projects through general obligation? The GO bonds allow the village to fund projects, large projects, numerous projects, while not impacting our fund balance. So our regular fund balance that we use to run the government in general, we're able to take care of these projects, and it's spread out. The financing for this is spread out over 20 years. Why not fund projects through taxes or loans? When you do, obviously, we could raise the taxes, but we want you to have the decision on if this bond passes or not. The other piece is if we go to the bank to get out a loan, the interest rates on those loans are going to be much higher, as well as when the bank, anytime you go to the bank, as we all probably know, they're going to want something collateral. And giving them a trail, a greenway, a road is not something that's, suited for what they're looking for is collateral. And again, the biggest thing is that we can fund more than one project at a time. I'll get into the positives of that as well. What are other places that have successfully done GO bonds? There's a list of, just in November, these communities here have gone out for bonds. We put this in there because this is not unusual for a municipality to go out and use a bond to raise funds for taking care of projects. You see a lot of these are, parks and recreation, transportation, similar to what we're looking for. Other bond, these communities here have passed it and have done this and passed it, and they have already gone through starting their projects and working on what they've raised the bond for. How long has the village council been discussing GO bonds? We really started talking about it when we were looking at the roundabout. And the roundabout, we went to the North Carolina DOT and we tried to get them to, let's get this done, let's get this done. We were all frustrated it was not getting done. So we were looking at how could we possibly take care of the roundabout in today's dollars instead of it just be extended out, because North Carolina DOT, we were at the mercy of their timeline. But we also, being that we knew things that were happening in the village, we can't look at things just today or next year. We have to look at things 5, 10, 15 years from now. And how do we take care of those things? So we have a list of projects that we've been working on for some time. Some of them are truly just a Christmas list, just a wish list. And then some of them, especially as it pertains to roads, those are immediate needs, and those are things that we have to start taking care of now and planning for it now. Has there been public support for project listed on the bond referendum? Back in 2019, some of you may have filled out the survey. We did send out the survey. We got responses. The number that we got back are statistically significant and a good indicator of what the people wanted in Marvin. These next few slides are just going to really kind of go through the numbers of what the survey results came back at. 77% of the people wanted more parks, open space, recreational options. The biggest thing was, as people said in the survey, they wanted greenways, nature preserve, public parks. The other piece of this, they wanted connectivity, which is important. So when we start looking at putting greenways and trails in, they spoke and said, we just want to be able to have one neighborhood connect to another neighborhood, which connects to the downtown area or the Heritage District corridor. Here's just some of the percentages again on the survey results. And again, I'm going to kind of go through these because I know we have a lot of important questions afterwards, but you'll get this, like as Kim said, you'll get this slide deck. We can put your email down, we'll get it sent out to you. Bond totals, there are two bonds. There's a transportation bond, which covers roads and greenways. The second one is Parks and Recreation bond, which is Village Hall Park and Future Park. I want to take a minute here. transportation bond. People have asked, we got roads and greenways. And it's, this piece was, why'd you lump greenways in with roads? We looked at it as how do we use transportation? Greenways and trails are transportation. How do we move people from one area to another area? So that was one of the deciding factors there. It also gave something for everyone when you start looking at the roads and the greenways combined. There's some people that don't have roads, have greenways, and vice versa. I'll get into those numbers here in just a minute. Parks and Recreation, Village Hall Park and the Future Park, I'll get into that in one of the slides coming up as well. Transportation project list, 6 new expanded greenways trail totaling $9.9 million. Take a minute there. It would be disingenuous of me to stand here and think and try to convince you that that's not a big number and that's kind of a crazy number. It is, that's a big number. However, let me fully explain where this came from. When we started putting this information together, we had to have a basis for everything that we did. We can't just randomly come up with projects, randomly come up with lists, and randomly come up with numbers. Back in 2020, we had a consultant come in, and they put together a master plan in the spring of 2020. And basically, that master plan says, here's all the trails, and here are the estimates that go along with the trails. Oh, but by the way, when we do the estimates for the trails, we want to let you know, you told us that this is something that you would like to get done over the next 20 years. In that 20 years, they said, okay, in 20 years, we're going to go ahead and put a formula in place that takes care of inflation, cost of money, so forth and so on, which the numbers that they come up with are pretty large numbers on one of these. But let me give you an example, and please listen to this is important. In the Greenway, there was a trail that said, and that trail is going to cost you roughly $450,000 to do this one trail. We just completed that trail, and that trail cost us less than $60,000. It was about $58,000. So you can see where pricing in the master plan is totally out of whack what reality is. But it just gives you an example. Also, in the Greenway, as we put this together, and you look at the trail system that we're looking at, we didn't leave anything out. So, and the reason why, someone could say, well, why didn't you put my trail in? Well, why didn't my trail go in? So, you know what? We're going to put them all in. Now, we already do know that there are trails in here that are added into that number that aren't going to be used. For example, there's one at the very end, and I'll show you when we get to it. That trail, those constituents have come to us and said that particular part of the trail, everyone in that area does not want that trail. Is that trail going to go in? Very likely not. There's also trails in there that go right through here, down by the neighborhood right here. The new one coming in. Broadmoor has already said that we're going to take care of that trail. Well, that's part of that number as well. So there's a large part of, there's part of that number that is not a reality in what we're going to be pulling funds for. So I'm going to go back through the list as well. $840,000 for Bonds Grove. So again, we'll get back to those numbers. Again, there's the greenways that we're talking about, the Marvin Loop. Hopefully my little, you see this section right here? That section right there is the likelihood of it happening not real good, not real fruitful for us. As well, when you start to look at the loop, as there are chances, there are a lot of greenways and easements and stuff, and still dealing with the state of North NCDOT, we're not going to be able to get those. Will we like some of them? Sure, but reality is we're not going to get all of them.
And I think the important point there is that if those projects don't happen, we don't ever pull the money or pay penny interest on it.
That's a good point, and I'll get to that as well. In this, we actually added in a private road assessment program, so there are roads in the village of Marvin that are private roads. They have the option, those communities, those neighborhoods have the option of coming to the village of Marvin and saying, hey, we would like so we can get some of that economies of scale when you bring people in to take care of the roads. We'd like to be a part of that as well. So we get your economies of scale, but we'll pay for the roads, and we'll pay a set interest rate on that as well. So it's not like we're giving them that, but we added that in there. To John's point, if they don't come to this, that number, we don't even pull those funds for that. What will taking over the connector roads accomplish? Greater local control is probably one of the biggest things. We hear residents all the time, we need to get our deputies out. We need to slow the people down. We got people coming from Waxhaw, they speed through here to get to work. If we own these roads, we have the control of monitoring speed limits, so we can change the speed limit. We can put calming devices out. The other piece is we have people come to us from neighborhoods and go, our children try to just cross the walk here just to get to school. How about a crosswalk? We need a crosswalk. That's not up to us. We can't do that. NCDOT has to approve us doing that. And they look at us and go, it's already 35 miles an hour, nothing we can do. So even when you look at Joe Carr, people race up and down Joe Carr. Could we slow that down? Absolutely. We own the roads. We can put a four-way stop there in the middle where you cross over in Marvin Creek. Put a stop sign. There's already 2 stop signs. You put 2 more stop signs. It's going to slow people down. We can then also have a safe crosswalk, because people like, if we have a crosswalk with lights flashing and stuff like that, absolutely. I think we would all like that. However, we can't do that from a Village of Marvin standpoint, because we don't own the roads, and we would just go to NCDOT, and NCDOT is going to say, nope, not interested. Economies of scale. So if we try to do a section of road, and they come out and they go, okay, we're going to do that one section, the price on that is just like with anything. If I buy one of something from Lowe's, it's going to cost me $5, but if I buy 100 of them, I'm probably going to get that for maybe $3.50. So we're looking at getting economies of scale, and hence the reason we're going to a GO bond instead of just through the form of raising taxes. So economies of scale, whether it's the roads, the greenways, anything that we do, having that sum of money to be able to go to a contractor and say, we don't want to just do it single project at a time. We want to do it as a whole.
Jamie?
Yeah.
Just want to point out that too, adding to that is how many times we go out to bid, and because the project is so small, normally we require 3 bids from contractors. Sometimes we only get 1, sometimes we get 0. And that a lot of time is due to the project being so small, and if they do bid on it, they're going to bid on it for higher prices when it comes to that. So I just wanted to point that out. And that's happened over the last 10 years.
Standardized quality. The other piece of this is we would like for all of the neighborhoods to look the same. We would like the roads to look the same. Quicker response time. I think I just talked with someone just a little while ago that said, well, what's the difference in NCDOT and Marvin? And they just had an incident where there was an issue with the road. They were like, well, if we have to call NCDOT, that's going to take forever. It's not going to happen. They contacted us. We had someone on it within a day. You're not, in all likelihood, you're not going to get someone from NCDOT to come and approach any issue that you have in one day. But while I'm on that topic, today is a landmark day, and I'm glad y'all are here. It's a wonderful day. The roads that we have out there today, that's the best they're going to look in the next 10 to 15 years. North Carolina DOT does not have the money or the funding to take care of those roads, and especially neighborhood roads. From a weather standpoint, this winter, if we have any kind of inclement weather that comes in, they're going to take care of Newtown Road, and that's it. So if there are any other roads, if you're looking for NCDOT to come out to do anything with it, they're not going to do it. NCDOT just does not have the money, and every time we go to NCDOT looking for money, they give us all the reasons why they can't. They're out of money. The road money that they get is from a gas tax, because people go, well, they raise our taxes in North Carolina. It does not come from your taxes. When you raise your individual taxes, it comes from the gas tax. What has happened over the last 5 to 7 years? Oh, the introduction of electric cars. Electric cars, they're not paying that gas tax. I'm on the board of CRTPO, Charlotte Regional Transportation Planning Organization, and they are scrambling now to find ways. How can we find ways to grab those electric cars and be able to tax them and get that money back in because they're losing money? Well, that's something that should have happened, started 10 years ago, but it didn't. So we're scrambling from that standpoint.
I think it's also important to point out is we're not, jumping into the roads business here at this point. That decision was actually made more than 12 years ago, I think, from a prior council when they started accepting POW bill funds. So what we're trying to do is to, we've got roads we're already responsible for that, serve the village residents. What we're trying to do is to kind of equalize so that the rest of the village of Marvin, that doesn't have their roads taken over at that point will at least be able to have similar, upkeep, maintenance, things of that nature.
So part of that was, it used to be where if a neighborhood come online, North Carolina DOT would partner with the village of Marvin and say, oh, hey, you know what? Let's bring them up to standards, and then you can take them over and you get the POW bill funds. Then there was a list, because there are people in the village of Marvin who goes, well, that list is still there. That list is gone. That list is no longer. So if you're in a neighborhood that says, oh, they're going to repave my roads in 2028, they're not. That list is gone. Parks and Recreation project list. What we're looking at, if you can see right over here, there's a placard board over here that kind of outlines that. There's we're looking at an amphitheater band shell, multi-use event lawn, walking loop, covered seating, and at the bottom of this, you see funding for future opportunities. So right now, we've been approached by Waxhaw. There's a 34, 35 acre, 36 acre property right on the line of Marvin and Waxhaw, excuse me, that they've approached us and said, would you be open to partnering with us on that to turn that into some kind of sports complex, sports park? So we're still in talks with that. Whether that happens or not, we don't know. Back to the point before, as these funds, if you look for the funds of that, if that doesn't happen, we don't pull those funds, we don't have to pay it back, and we're not paying interest on it. But we did add that in there. What are the project costs for Parks and Recreation project list? New Village Hall Park, $4 million. That number is incorrect. Hate to break it to you. Because here's the thing, already we were awarded a Part F grant, and where it's matching. So it's $500,000, we matched $500,000, and then we were just awarded just recently another $250,000. So that comes off of that number. Here's another thing that I don't know how many people know this, and I know that we've put it out there, but over the last 4 years since I've been here, we've gotten nearly $4 million from federal, state, and local grants and funding. That has not gone out to you. You're not paying taxes on that piece. So whether this passes or not, we are going to continue to go out for grants and for other kind of funding, whatever it's for, to do whatever we can to garner funds and funding for anything that happens within the village of Marvin. That's a slide of the Village Hall Park. It's an amphitheater band shell. We're not looking to bring in AC/DC. We're not looking to bring in Megadeth or anyone like that, but what we're looking at is something like that, maybe on a Friday night, having some acoustic, someone to come in, play some acoustic. We have what's the program? March.
Have a speaker
March.
series there.
March can come in, where they do their information series on coyotes and snakes and all that kind of stuff. That's just a great place for them to be able to come in and do that. Okay, let's talk taxes. Current tax rate is 6 cents per $100 valuation. I'm going to go up here. We got our camera here. We put these other municipalities up here. These top four, if you look at their rate, they're less than 5 cents. Less than 5 cents assumes that they do not service their roads, so they do not receive Powell bill funding. We receive Powell bill funding, and today we're currently at, and someone correct me if I'm wrong, I'm gonna get approximate, we're at approximately 170,000. Sounds about right. But if you look at our tax rate, Marvin, we're at 6 cents. The next closest one in Union County is 18.5 cents. So we are the lowest among Union County municipalities that actually do service their roads. Current taxes and bond impact. So let me kind of step here and say, when you go to vote, you have options. You can vote for transportation and not parks. You can vote for transportation and parks. You can vote for just parks. You don't have to vote for any of them. But transportation only, if the taxes are approved, you're looking at a 4 cent in the fall of '25 and 2 cent in the fall of 2028. Parks and Recreation would be 3 cent in '25. And the total impact increase for the fall of '25 would be 8 cent if both bonds pass, and, it's a big and, the entire bond amounts are needed. We'll get into that in just a second. So what is the estimated taxes for this? So if you have a $500,000 tax value, and this goes off, so where the tax is derived from is your tax value, not the market value of your house. So it's the tax value. If you have a $500,000 tax value, that impact would be $400 annually, and go up to $400 annually. And in 2028, it would go an additional $137. If you're $1 million, you see that the impact would be $800 annually, and in 2028, it will be $275 annually. Here's a key piece to that. That reflects, assuming the interest rate of 5.3%, we have to give this presentation and we have to present this at the 5.3% because that's the highest interest rate over the past 20 years in the state of North Carolina. The state mandates that and legislates that and says we have to do that. Unfortunately, we're the first municipality that's been impacted by this. They passed it right before the first of the year, and we got impacted by it. But, so these numbers are based on an elevated tax rate of 5.3%, as well as the elevated numbers that come out of the master plan, as I told you before. What's the value of my house? Do I pay the increase on the value or the tax value? It's the tax value, not the market value. What is the anticipated debt payment and how will the debt be repaid? The repayment of the bonds will be spread over 20 years, and the average annual debt service is currently estimated at $1.55 million annually. Property tax revenues will support the debt service payments. Again, let me go back to, and I'll explain this further. That $1.55 million assumes that we're going to take all $20 million, and it's at the 5.3% interest. And the debt repayment is, again, spread out over 20 years, and the importance of that, it's not just the current residents that are going to be working to help pay this down, it's future residents as well. Understanding the interest rates, again, as I kind of told you before, the 20-year higher interest rate, the LGC requires the village to utilize the highest tax exempt interest rate charged for similar debt in North Carolina over the past 20 years. Our financial advisor, who's fortunate for us, is sitting here, so he keeps me honest, and he's going to, I'm sure, be able to answer some of your other questions as well. The village likely will see slightly lower rates. The current estimated interest rate when we put this presentation together was about 3.3 to 3.4% on the bonds, and my understanding is that they're a little less than that, but we'll get to that. These next few slides you'll see when we go on. I'm not going to just beat you to death with PowerPoint here and read through all this. The importance of this is what we wanted to be able to do is the financial strength of the village. Over the past years, we have done everything we possibly can to take care of your money, your tax money. And so we look at fund balance. We have a very strong fund balance. All of this has an impact on our rating, so we get a bond rating, and what our interest rate's going to be. So that's just really kind of highlighting what we've done over the past few years. Our village's net position, 5-year summary, if you look back to 2019, we were at $6.5 million. Now we're close to $15 million. That's the net position. This is not cash. It's not liquid. This is basically what we're saying with Village Hall, our roads, our trails, all the pieces added together, but our net position right now is roughly $15 million. I got to think we just went over the $15 million mark, but just wanted to let you know where we were at with that. Based on proposed bonds, how will the net position change and these projects considered assets? Yes, again, as we start adding greenways, trails, roads, taking all this stuff on, yes, we would see that net position increase. How do we compare with others? I put this in there. That's a lot of little words to kind of get through, but when you get the presentation, basically what we did for purposes of this presentation was to take our peers and municipalities throughout the state of North Carolina who are considered kind of the top as far as being fiscally sound, and these are some of the ratios that they did and how we stack up against those. And when you get through those, when you get the presentation, you look through those, we're in a very sound position through not only here in Marvin, but against our peers as well. Why is the current financial position relevant for the GO bonds? Again, the LGC and the credit rating agencies, they look at the health of our financials to basically just where we stand as far as getting a good interest rate, and if all of this is even viable, and if this is what we need to do. Without the use of GO bonds, the village capacity to fund these projects while still maintaining fund balance reserve is limited. So the projects that we are looking at doing and getting the kind of the cost efficiencies and that with this, that's the importance of being able to do the GO bond and working with this. Why not let the citizens pick and choose from a project list on the ballot? There are many projects that we've got listed. The importance of this is, again, we put together a project list years ago, and we've added and taken away from that project list. There is, to be able to put every project on there or just bundle up certain projects, there's a lot of administration that goes along this. We have to go to the Board of Elections to put all this stuff together and present it to them. So it's a tall order and a tall task just to be able to do what we're doing now and dividing it up into two bonds. How can I be guaranteed projects listed on the educational material will be implemented? There are, I call them guardrails, and it's hard to say guardrails because there's typically two, but I think there's three. One guardrail is the LGC, And they are, we basically take this to them and say, okay, we're wanting to go out for a GO bond. And they look at our list of projects and they go, okay, it's viable, it's real what you're doing, it's not uncommon, here we go. We're gonna hold you accountable for that, and they're gonna audit us. They're gonna ask for reports from us to say, these are the projects that you said you were gonna do, we wanna make sure that you do them. First Tryon is, they're the same thing. They're the one that helped us put all of this information together from a financial standpoint and looking at the projects as well. All the projects are listed, and we've got a spreadsheet that my eyes are bleeding of all the different things that are on there and just, moving an interest rate here and there and whatever we can do. But those projects are not just projects that the general public would say, if they pass the money, then we'll come up with the projects. If they pass the bonds, we'll come up with the projects, and then we'll come up with what these are gonna cost. We pretty much know what projects are and what the cost to some of those are, because we still have to go out for bids in that. But this council is committed to the projects that we've outlined and what we're wanting to do. That's not to say that down the road, you get a change in council, someone else on that council can say, we don't want to do that. So you have the guaranteed project, you've got the LGC, you got First Tryon, and the third guardrail is you. So as I said before, on one of the trails, that trail probably not going to happen because everyone that lives on that road said emphatically they don't want it in there. Well, that's the same with you. So as we start to do this and we start looking at some of the projects, whether it's trails, it's road, whatever the case may be, your input is extremely helpful. We want you to tell us what we don't want that, or we do want that. So that's kind of the third rail as far as the project list.
Just one thing too, we're gonna be prioritizing these projects. We don't just get this money, within 3 months and start spending it. We'll be prioritizing those projects and kind of laying them out over the next 7 years that we have to pull those monies out. During those 7 years, there's gonna be 2-3 more elections that you folks are also gonna have opportunities then. Are we doing a good job and being responsible people of your money? You'll have the ability to impact who's on your council based on how you feel we're doing.
Another piece of clarification on this too is you've got the two bonds, you've got the transportation, you've got the park. We can't go outside of that. So if the money, we get the funding for the parks, and we use some of that money, and if there's money left over, we can't go, hey, you know what, let's do a water treatment plant. We can't do that because it's not in that bucket. It's not in that list of projects that were there. So we're confined to those two buckets, and we have to stay inside those two buckets.
So Jamie, can I jump in really quick
Sure.
with that? So what Jamie was just talking about, it's State Statute 159-48. It would be under D, number 5. So for the transportation, it would be providing streets and sidewalks, including without limitation, bridges, viaducts, causeways, overpasses, underpasses, and alleys. Paving, grading, resurfacing, and widening streets, sidewalks, curbs, gutters, culverts, and drains, traffic control, signals, markers, lighting, and grade crossings, and elimination thereof and grade separations. For parks, you would go to number 13, and it would be providing parks and recreation facilities, including, without limitation, land, athletic fields, parks, playgrounds, recreation centers, shelters, stadiums, arenas, permanent and temporary stands, golf courses, swimming pools, wading pools, marinas, and lighting.
Thank you. If the referendum questions are approved, how quickly could projects begin? I wish we could start the day after. That doesn't mean we can't start that process because we have to put everything out to bid. We have to get right-of-ways, we have to get easements. So there's a lot of things that have to happen before money's even pulled. So it's not like on March 6th, we go to the bank and go, okay, where's our $20 million? I'll explain more about that in just a minute as well. Basically, we hope that you would see a lot of these projects really, you'll start to see some of them come together very early on, within that 6 to 12 months. We wouldn't pull the first pull of money until the fall of 2024. At that point in time, we would probably know which, kind of that priority, we're looking at the priority list that John was talking about, and really kind of capturing that low-hanging fruit. A lot of that would probably be because again, priorities for what we're looking at is really, roads, then roads, and then roads. But we would want to be able to get this started rather quickly. What happens once all the projects are completed? The bonds will mature in 20 years. Will the tax rate revert back to its pre-bond rate? We can't, this council can't hold a future. In 20 years, I won't be here. We can't hold a future council to a certain tax rate. But what we look at here is we're committed to taking care of the projects that we are, as minimal amount of money as we possibly can. And what happens if the total bond proceeds are not needed? Here's where I think some of the participants, the constituents out there, think that when they say $20 million, that we're going to go to the bank and get $20 million, we have to pay all $20 million back, and it's at and interest on all $20 million. We're going to do two pulls. The one pull, let's just say that first pull is for $7 million. And at that point in time, what we go to will have First Tryon represent us and going to the bond market and getting those bonds. So at that point in time, we pull that amount in, and then we're charged. We're required to pay that amount back at a set interest rate. And then we look at, once we get those projects done and we're looking at, then we look at the second pull. What are those projects? What do they look like? If we don't need all of that funding, we're not going to pull it. We don't want to use it. Why do we do just two pulls instead of doing 5 or 6 as the projects come along? Because it costs a lot of money for us to be able to pull, to make those pulls out and go to the bond market for those. So it's almost like as if I need to have my bathroom and my kitchen done, and I go to the bank. I tell the bank, okay, I don't know how much it's going to cost. It's going to cost, but I'd like to get a home equity line for $50,000. And then I have a line of $50,000. That doesn't mean I'm going to go do it. I go to my contractor. My contractor tells me, hey, I can do the bathrooms and the kitchen, and I can do it for $20,000. That's great. So then I pull my $20,000. I pay my contractor. I'm done. I'm charged on the $20,000. Just because I have a $50,000 line of credit doesn't mean I'm going to be charged for that, and I only pay interest on what I borrow against. Who monitors to assure bonds are being spent as intended? Again, I would say that there's the 3 guardrails: the LGC, First Tryon, and y'all. And I say that with all sincerity. The LGC is made up, just because I've had this question and people go, well, no, it's just a group of people. But it's a group of people that, I think it's 9 people, am I correct in that? 9 people that are retired financial executives, some judges, some government people went in there, but they know this stuff like the back of their hand. And so anything we do, we provide them reports. Anything we do that we step out of line, they'll certainly let us know that. But we have the LGC, we have First Tryon, and again, if all these projects that we're talking about and all these improvements and the things that we're doing, we do an open forum. So when we have our council meetings, it's live. You can come here, you can sit just like you are tonight and come and listen to what we're talking about. There's nothing, we're as transparent as we can possibly be.
I also wanted to add where I've seen that because there is a project list with numbers associated, that if they were to pass that, it kind of rubber stamps all those projects. No, they will be prioritized, they will be bid out, they will be going through due diligence of planning boards and Parks and Greenway boards and things like that. So just want to make sure that you also realize it's not a rubber stamp for all those projects. We, as good stewards of the community, will continue to do our due diligence to make sure each project is worthy as we go along.
Thanks, John. With that being said, too, as I mentioned before, this council, I can only speak for this council, we do everything we can to go out and find, like I said, federal, state, and local funding for whatever we can. But as being stewards of your money, there are many things that we do that a lot of people don't know about. Again, the $4 million, a lot of people don't know about it. When we started doing stuff at Village Hall and we started adding things like plants, and we put that out to bid, and someone goes, well, might as well bid high, because, well, we looked at that bid and said, that's way too high. Give us the plants, we'll plant them ourselves. Probably 70% of that was labor. I come in on a Sunday, and there's other members in here too, that come in on a Sunday and dug plants and planted plants. Did we have to do that? No, because I don't want to pay that tax. I don't want an increase in tax. But I do it because I feel it's right for me and it's right for everybody sitting in this room and the constituents of Marvin. So there are a lot of things that we do that do go unnoticed. So, and I'm only saying that from a standpoint, I don't want that tax. I don't want a tax increase. But I also know those roads aren't going to get fixed. And I also know that things over the next 15 years aren't going to just happen because we think they're going to happen. And if it's unsafe for me to assume that they're just going to stay at 6 cents and we're going to get vast improvements over 6 cent tax rate. Oh, let me go back because I think that's important. What happens if the bonds don't pass? Projects, it says projects will be delayed and canceled. Critical projects could be funded via other sources, including future tax increases. Again, there is a risk of higher project costs due to inflation, due to resources that go along with it. So again, we started out with $1 million roundabout, and just in a couple of years, it went to a $2.5 million roundabout. We see it every day. We all do. So all we're trying to do is provide the mechanism to take care of the issues and items in the village that need to be addressed and have to be addressed over the next couple years, 5 years, and 10 years down the road. I want to go back to Jim, do you have a question? The other thing too, from a road standpoint, in the village of Marvin, what's the difference in the Marvin standard and NCDOT? Well, there's some specific little things like NCDOT, when they put in a road, they have a 2-inch variance on their manhole covers and their curbing. We have an 1/8 to 1/4. That's huge when you start talking about roads. Response time, NCDOT, good luck. Village of Marvin, we get a phone call, we want to address it right away. But we just want to be able to give you the option of how you want to address these issues, whether you want to address them near term and are spread out over a 20-year period of time, or do you want to just, extend it and kind of pay as we go?
Jamie, I do want to mention some of the things you pointed out. We get 2 opportunities to take a draw total, correct?
Correct.
I have that.
Yep.
We have 7 years to do that with some opportunity for potential extensions, but it's within 7 years.
Yep.
Once we take that draw, he mentioned, say it's $9 million, that will be based on the interest rate, which if it's too high, we can say, you know what, not the time to draw it now. Quite frankly, we don't have to draw it. But if it's the right interest rate, if it's the right amount of money, once we lock that in, that's locked in for that 20 years. Then the second tranche that we take, maybe 3 years down the road, that will get locked in at that rate, and the clock starts at 20 years for that. So the interest rate is fixed. Here's the thing, we pull $7 million, and that's issued to us. We're not necessarily shelling out $7 million of money. Do you want to talk about where that money can go and how that can help pay down? Because it's an interest rate, we can actually take funds and put it into an interest-bearing account,
Yes,
correct?
yes.
Do you want to explain that a little bit?
Yeah, if we have, so in other words, if we pull $7 million and just for whatever reason, we use 5.5 of that, we can take the $1.5 million and we can put it into an investment fund to where instead of paying 3%, 3.5%, it's paying 5%, and we can take the proceeds of that and roll it back over into what we're currently paid, which impacts your tax rate. So again, I want to point out that when we were looking at the numbers, all of this is worst-case scenario, and all of this is based on the entire 20 million, which I've already told you that it's not. Those numbers are a lot of those numbers are inflated, but it's over a 20-year period. So yes, we do have the ability to be able to do that. Now, the state has caught on because there are other municipalities who have taken funding and borrowed the 5, or they may have gone to the bank or go to the bond market and said, oh, we're going to pull 20 and we're going to use 10, but we're going to stick 10 into an investment account and take that money to pay it down. And the state has caught on to that and said, no, there's only a certain amount you can do. And it gets to a certain point, and Chaz, if I'm saying something incorrect, but
Yeah, I would just say that the LGC is going to keep an eye and make sure that you're only borrowing for projects that you have identified in
Right.
bid. So if you're borrowing, ideally you're borrowing for projects that you're going to execute in the next 2 to 3 years. So you might not spend down that money immediately on day one. You're able to invest it and earn a return on the unspent bond proceeds until those are eventually spent. But you can't borrow money for the sake of just earning interest on it. It's got to be towards an identified project.
right, thank you.
Jamie, could you go back to where they have the tax rates on there? I had a comment to make.
The tax
Just
rate?
one thing I wanted to kind of call out as well. No, with the little thing, tax rates.
Tax rates
In
for
the
each
upper right-hand
municipality
corner.
where it listed Marvin, there you go.
There
You
it
just
is.
hit it.
So we're at current 6 cents. And if both bonds were to pass, over the next couple of years, that could increase specifically from this bond thing to about another 10 cents or 10.2 cents, something like that. So that'd get you from 6 cents to about 16 cents. And what you would notice is that our standing in deference to, in comparison to the other ones, would have us at about 16 cents. That doesn't even move us one notch down. So yes, it is an increase in taxes. Again, just like Jamie, I'm not looking to pay more taxes, but I'm looking to take care of the village and the residents in a responsible way. And I think we'd still be, as far as ones that are taking care of our roads, it wouldn't even put our taxes over any of the other municipalities now in Union County.
And in fairness, I've been doing this for 10 years. When the former council got us into the road business, I objected. Go back and look at the audio on it, because you can't do roads for at the time, it was 5 cents. They projected within 8 to 10 years, all of the roads in Marvin would be under Marvin's domain. We still are at about 50% right now. 8 years later, we had to get into the the POW bill, you have to be at least 5 cents. That's where we were. They started us in that, and here we are right now. An interesting note about the difference when you talk about what DOT does and what we would do. I was walking my neighborhood the other day, and I crossed over into South Carolina, And right at that divide line, as you walk on the roads there are cracks everywhere and stuff. We're doing a maintenance thing. There's a maintenance program with the roads that we own currently right now. There's a fog sealing process. There's a total maintenance process that's involved in the roads that are under our umbrella. Our goal is to get all of the roads under Marvin and to be able to respond, like you said earlier, to a call that says, hey, we have an issue here, we were on it, and the issue should be resolved within a week, so.
Well, all the roads, for those that might not know, all the roads have a score, whether they're Marvin roads or North Carolina DOT roads, and they have a scoring system. What's important for the Marvin roads is we look at that scoring system and we want to keep everything above, let's just say, on a scale of 1 to 100, we want to keep those above 85. So how do we do that? We do the fog seal, the crack seal, we do all the preventive maintenance to keep them up to standards, and we do it on a regular basis, which extends the life of the roads. So the life of a road, typically, you can look at it, is somewhere between 15 to 20 years. Probably 15 years if there's no preventive maintenance, and then you just got to come back in and you got to repave the whole road, which is a higher expense. So what we're looking at doing is, as we bring new roads on and the current roads that are here, we want to maintain, continue putting them in that maintenance program and keeping them above that 85 threshold. North Carolina DOT, they look at some of the scorings, and I think some of them, if you look right here, look at here, Waxhaw Marvin, PCS score 22. You look at these. I mean, you look at these scores, and they're not getting any better. These scores, NCODT, they look at them, and they're going, well, it is what it is. They're not going to come out here and they're not going to do anything. The only thing they're probably going to do is take care of Newtown Road. So that's an important piece to getting the roads and taking the roads over. Some of the things I talked about before, but also getting into the maintenance thing. I've gone through the presentation. I know there can't be any questions.
What is the purpose of the private road assessment? Why is the homeowner, if I'm on a private road, I elected to do when I bought that property? Why does the township feel compelled that I, as a non-private road, I should have to fund somebody else's choice?
You're not. We put that in there, as I explained, we put that in there because there are roads in Marvin that are not paved. And if they have to voluntarily come to us and say, we want to take care of our roads and gather some of your economies of scale and take care of that. It's at no cost, it is no difference to you because we're gonna charge them an interest rate, and they got to pay it back in, let's say, 5 years at their interest rate. So there's no cost to us. We just put it in there because we have recognized that there are roads in the village of Marvin that are not.
So you're saying that this is a net neutral?
Yes.
It's not going to cost the
Yes.
taxpayer a dime, even though we're fronting the money?
No.
Councilman Lund,
So when does, hang on, so to clarify that,
Right.
what is the payback time? I see that it's 5 years. Is that, so we are fronting money?
No, the first Ryan can answer that question.
Okay.
So the village, it is assumed that the village would borrow money to fund those private roads and amortize it over a 20-year period. But the private, the citizens on the private road would repay their portion of that borrowing back over 5 years. So it's actually somewhat of a net benefit to the village because the portion of the borrowing that was amortized over 20 years is actually going to be paid back over 5 years. So the residents that are not impacted by the private road program would not be any worse off for those projects being funded.
And that's assuming that anybody uses that. It's been talked about, but it hasn't been asked for as of yet. So we don't know that anybody's going to actually ask for it. If nobody asks for it, we don't borrow the money for it. We would only borrow what we would need for whatever
But you
projects are asked for.
you just answered the question, you're borrowing the money. So somebody needs to show the economics of how it does not cost me to fund somebody's personal choice of being on a private road. I think that's a reasonable request. Talk about transparency, make it transparent, show it in a table. I don't believe it, because as soon as you take money out, we're paying interest on it.
We can pull up the model if you want us to do that.
Sure.
There's one other thing about a private road. Everybody on it has to agree to it. You got a guy in the middle, you got 5 others, and he says no, then nobody needs it.
I've got,
I want to get a mic to you so we can hear you.
If you're a private community and you want the town of Marvin to borrow the money for your roads, doesn't it then become a public road, which should not be gated? We should not be responsible for paying, even taking on that debt for, and excuse me if anybody lives in a gated community, but we should not be responsible for even having anything to do with that. That should come out of their HOA or whatever, however they fund gated communities.
Yeah, we agree with you. We wouldn't have gates. They would be a Marvin-maintained
So
road
you're-
after that.
So you're telling me all these gated communities that might use this are going to take their gates down?
None of the private roads that we're talking about have gates on them.
So none of them are in Marvin or the gate, none of them?
No, ma'am.
Okay.
And you are correct. If we do this road project, then they would be assumed into the Village of Marvin road system, and we would maintain them from there on. But the cost of, the way our road acceptance policy is written, the road has to be at Marvin's standard for us to accept it. So therefore, it would have to be paved, and it would have to meet the minimum standards that we require to take it on. So the reason for this is so that we can front the funds to get the road paved with economies of scale, because we're going to be paving a bunch of roads, so we get it at a better rate. And then those folks that own that road would pay that back within 5 years with interest, which would offset the money and the interest and pay back a little higher interest actually than what we're borrowing at, which means that with the rest of the village would not be paying for any part of that. It's just, all we're doing is fronting it, they're paying it back, it's coming out of their pockets, and then we would assume the roads into the road system, and it would be just like any other municipal road within the village.
Once
hang
the
on.
road goes
Hang on.
public from private, does the town benefit from that public road then, as far as a matching amount from the state for maintenance?
From public to private?
We would get a.
From private to public, excuse me.
We would get a very small amount in Powell bill funds for that
But
road.
there would
but
be
it
a-
would be minuscule. But going back to the gentleman in the back's question, if nobody comes to us to ask for this program, then that 500 and, I can't see, I'm sorry, $65,604, we wouldn't pull that. So we wouldn't even access that money. So if the transportation bond is approved, that would just kind of sit up there, not even touched, unless someone came to us and asked for it. And what we've been hearing is that the neighborhoods really aren't very interested in it. So I don't expect that $565,604 would ever be accessed. Because people have come to us and asked for it, and we're trying to make it equitable throughout the village and trying to find a way to do it for them that's not, that we're not doing a huge outlay of money for the village. And just at this side, Hunter's going to have a microphone for you. This side, Davey's going to have a microphone for you. So the reason we're trying to do this, we can all hear you, but it's live stream. So if you guys can please use the microphone so people that are listening at home or go back and listen to it can hear your questions and hear our answers, that would be fantastic. Okay.
First of all, thank you very much for having this meeting tonight. I really appreciate all of you taking time out of your busy schedules to meet with the residents of Marvin. I'm a fairly simple person, so a lot has been said here tonight, so I've got a couple simple questions. First and foremost, approximately how much does it cost to repave completely a road per mile?
The last engineer estimates that we got were approximately 200 to 250,000 per mile.
That's to completely repave the road? Like
Yes.
rip it up and repave it up to Marvin standards?
That's not full-depth reclamation, so it would be a profile mill and an overlay, a
Okay.
percentage
No,
overlay.
I'm talking about a complete repave, right? That's what I'm asking.
It depends.
And the reason why I'm asking is just doing a little bit of my simple research. Again, the information on the internet's not reliable, but I was coming up with numbers of like $1 to $3 million per mile. And that seemed to be fairly reasonable, and that was for like a 2-lane road, 1 lane in each direction. If that is it's a pretty wide number, I think we'd all agree, $2 to $3 million per mile. If we're taking over 23 miles of road, that equates to, well, we could all do the math, 46 million to 69 million in future expenses in today's dollars if we have to eventually completely repave those roads at some point. I think what I gathered from this meeting tonight is all roads have a lifespan to them. Some of the things that are being recommended on the sheet that was distributed was sealing, patching, etc. Being a homeowner, I kind of equate that to having a roof on my house and knowing that that roof is probably going to last 25 years. And I know there's going to be a big expenditure down the road that I'm going to have as a homeowner to completely replace that roof. I may be able to patch the roof, seal the roof, fix pieces of the roof over the life of the roof to help extend it. But I know eventually I'm going to have to replace the roof. So what I'm a little concerned about is potentially on the low end, even $1 million per mile with 23 miles of road, that's 23 million on the low end. More likely 46 million on the high end, 69 million. And once we take over these roads, it's my understanding we can never give these roads back to anybody. There are roads forever. So that means we take on all the future costs of the road, including full replacement of them, right? Again, that may not happen all at once, but we know, just like with the roof of our house, we know that eventually we're going to have to replace that roof completely. So my concern is when I think about that, and I think about the future of Marvin and the future liability that this small municipality is going to have to take on, somewhere $46, $69 million in today's dollars, never mind inflation. We all here know about inflation, especially lately. How are we going to pay for this? What I see here with the bonds that are being proposed, only 5 of the 20 million, or 5 million of the bonds, if I understood correctly from what I read, is only for roads. So even the 15.35 million of what's called transportation bond for roads and greenways, down below that on the next slide, it says 9.9 million is for the greenways. So that would tell me that there's about 5 million left for the roads. Help me understand how 5 million of bonds is going to help pay for those future roads to be repaved in today's dollars at $46 to $69 million in today's dollars, never mind inflation.
So a few assumptions I want to clarify here is that you're assuming whatever accuracies that you have looked up are correct. According to
right.
the last estimates that we got from our engineer, the profile mill / repaving, what you're referring to, is around 200 to 250,000 per mile. You would not need a full depth reclamation on roads unless the substrate of the road is in poor condition. And that means there's a lot of water penetration. I'm not going to pretend to be an engineer and tell you how that goes into play, but what you're referring to as repaving is exactly what I'm saying, the 200 to 250 per mile. So I don't know where your estimates are, but that's not what we've received from our engineers.
And the maintenance program that we employ on our roads prevents that road-based degradation because we seal the roads. And unlike a roof, roads can be preserved by doing the fog seal and the crack seal to keep the water penetration from going through the cracks that are natural in an asphalt paved road. Those are filled and sealed to keep the water from penetrating and breaking down the road subbase. So therefore, we can extend the life of the road by a significant amount of time before it has to be milled and recapped. And we're talking about a 1.5 to 2 inch cap on the road. If they're maintained correctly, that's all you have to do to a road to keep it in good shape. You don't have to go and dig it up like they're doing on Waxhaw Marvin Road right now, because that road's been neglected. That's the one with the number 22 rating on it, because it was not taken care of. It has big trucks on it beating it up every day, and it has deep degradation into the road base because water penetration. Water doesn't flow very well there. It sits in there because the road has caved in. There's numerous reasons why that road is in the shape that it's in, and that's why they're doing the extensive work that they're doing to it. None of our neighborhood roads will ever get to that state, and I don't expect our secondary roads to get to that state either, with maintenance program being employed the way we have it set up to be employed.
So the 250,000 miles of $250,000 per mile of road, if we have 23 miles of road,
It's $5 million for the additional 25, so 25, just 250,000 per mile.
So is
$5
it fair
million.
to say, would you go on record to say that the $5 million of bonds that are being raised for the roads are enough to repave all of our roads?
I wouldn't go into the assumption of that would be the application that's needed. I don't
No,
know
I'm not
what
saying that
application's
that's the
needed.
application that's needed, but the reason why I'm asking is because the list of expenses, potential expenses that you were indicating were overinflated likely, don't come anywhere close. The list that you had up there doesn't come anywhere close to doing just that to the roads at all.
So what I can tell you is that we have an engineer that has come out and assessed every single road, every single mile that we've got listed, and they've given us engineered certified estimates on what they think is applicable.
Understood.
So what they're telling us is what we're telling you.
Understood. Thank you. The last question is, I know you indicated at the beginning, at the open, that the state is out of money and doesn't have money to help us with roads. It's my understanding that the state of North Carolina has a very high rating in terms of their municipal bonds. From my knowledge of governmental accounting, all the state needs to do is themselves issue another bond, just like we are doing. So what has been done, as opposed to us raising the debt and getting a bond here and lobbying the community, the local community, can you give us a little bit of an idea of what the council has done recently to go to the state, to Raleigh, on a fairly regular basis to represent the village of Marvin, to lobby the state to raise the debt to take care of our roads better than, they're doing now? Because my knowledge of governmental accounting and states is that whether it's the federal government, the state government, or the local municipality, is that you're only out of money if you haven't borrowed money.
So I'll answer that question if you don't mind.
Thank you again for everybody coming here today. I appreciate it.
Great question, and I will say this council, myself included, have a really good relationship with our local legislators. We've been able to secure a lot of funds for various projects, namely parks and recreation opportunities. We have had several conversations with our local legislators when we have issues that arise. A couple of years ago, when council started considering this bond, they actually did go to the legislator to try to get kind of a deal worked out where we could go ahead and pay for the roads today and get reimbursed over time with the appropriations from the legislator. That didn't really go anywhere. We've tried all we can. with the legislators to make that happen. And I think, Mayor Polino, you were at the meetings. We actually drove up to Raleigh, had conversations with them. I think we even spoken with the Speaker of the House and various representatives in addition to our current legislators. If I remember correctly, you were there as well, and maybe one other person, I'm not really sure. But we have made efforts to do so, and they've not really gone anywhere from a standpoint of roads.
I'll just add on to that as well. The reason we put the other examples up there, the other municipalities are seeing the same things that we're seeing. They didn't go borrow that money because let's just go borrow money and we'll put it under transportation. They're seeing the same things we're seeing. And the state representatives are telling the same thing. We don't have the money. Could they do it? I'm assuming they could. But other municipalities are seeing the same thing and they're having the same conversations. They're getting out ahead of it because they know the roads are not going to be touched. And again, when we're talking about roads, you've got some of the main thoroughfares, and that's all NCDOT. If NCDOT went out and said, okay, we're going to do the roads, they're not going to talk about neighborhood roads. It's going to be main thoroughfares. So then you're talking about neighborhood roads. Are those ever going to get touched? We're just all we're trying to do is get out ahead of it. We're seeing the numbers. We're seeing what the state telling us. We've done everything. We've begged for money. We've met with everybody. It's just the state of where we're at. If we want to take care of them, this is how we go about doing it.
And I think we can also see the evidence in it and things that we've already seen. The roundabouts that we had should have been done. We ponied our money and pledged that to the state for our percentages of it, but they still got delayed multiple times. And we were only really able to get them moved up by putting more money into the till. And if you look at Providence Road and the Providence Road rewidening, you would think that's a natural one for them to prioritize. But even that Providence Road rewidening keeps getting kicked back every couple of years. I think it's like 2028 now, when it was originally a few years ago.
It's got to go back further than that because they're wanting to do the Bonds Grove Church sitting on CRTPO. They basically said, okay, we're going to widen Providence Road. And oh, by the way, we're going to do the roundabout in Bonds Grove, Waxhaw Marvin. We're going to do that in 2033. Really? So all the people from Waxhaw are going to detour because you got Providence Road under construction, and you're going to put them down Waxhaw Marvin Road and Bonds Grove Road. How far is that going to get backed up? So because of that, we went back to CRTPO and said, okay, we got to do something different. We can't go with that. So before you even start putting a shovel in the ground on Providence Road, you're going to have to put in Bonds Grove and Waxhaw Marvin. You're going to have to put that in first because traffic will never get through there. So all of those timelines, because of that, meeting with the legislatures, we identified that and went back to CRTPO and said, can we move that up? So we do have that moved up, but that's a huge number. That's that's almost $900,000. Thank you. Yes, sir.
What action is the council taking to fill what I would call the white space in? You talk about the greenway going around an area that is predominantly not Marvin. So what actions, strategies are being employed to increase the revenue by adding households? Because that greenway is going to be a benefit to non-Marvin residents.
Totally agree with you. We do everything we can because there's not forced annexation. Right now, someone has to come to us. And the good news is we have residents from these neighborhoods that one right there, and we have other neighborhoods. We have residents that are coming to us, but they have to come to us as a whole, as a neighborhood, and saying we want to. And would that broaden our tax base? Absolutely, which would impact your number because again, that's the worst case scenario number. So, we're trying to do that every day, and we're wanting to do that. I believe we're in a position now that they're starting to see the writing on the wall. Number one, they have no representation. I know their roads are private, but if they have any issues, who are they going to go to? The county or the state? Good luck with that. The other piece of it, as Marvin continues to make changes, and we're all sitting here, you have a voice in that change that's happening here in Marvin. They don't. There's not one word that they can say, and they're starting to realize that. And hopefully in time, we'll start to bring in some of these other neighborhoods and broaden that tax base. But, you know, we're doing everything we can. We obviously can't force annex them.
How do you make it attractive? I mean, how do you, I get it, the hope is a hopeless strategy. It doesn't get you anywhere.
We try,
So what compels the council to take a greenway space that is encompassing, if you look at it, it encompasses an entire area that is not a part of Marvin. Help me understand the method and the rationale of that. I live in a community that is, I will have to cross Providence Road to get into the Greenway. Tell me what makes sense what sense does that make for me to be an ally to a Greenway that I'm going to have to jeopardize my life to get to?
I think the important part with that is that while there may be folks that aren't in Marvin in the middle, we're looking to connect all of those Marvin neighborhoods as best we can, and with easements and things. And it's not going to happen very quickly, because some of those roads that we'd have to get easements down are a mix of Marvin homes and non-Marvin homes. But, you know, I think at some point you also have to say, do they benefit from the roads too? Yeah, they do. But the roads that you don't see on there are like Crane Road, things like that. And as those roads continue to deteriorate, those neighborhoods may start to think a little bit more about how Marvin takes care of the rest of the roads, yet theirs aren't. One of the other things we spoke about is there are things that we provide from Parks and Recreation, things of that nature. We talked about the potential for a partnership with like Waxhaw. And when we get into those type of things, there are things that we can do. For example, not a big thing, but if you rent the barn that we have at Marvin Eford Park, there's a Marvin residence fee, and then there's a fee for non-Marvin residents. If you wanted to participate in a sports league or something like that, we can set separate costs for Marvin residents versus non-residents. I've been involved in doing a lot of the annexation. I worked to help voluntarily annex most of the people that are in Marvin, down Waxhaw Marvin all the way to Weddington Chase. And we did that at the time because we didn't want to pay Waxhaw taxes. We kind of built a wall that kept them from coming much further north, which was their intent at the time. So did we create a little problem for ourselves? Yeah, but we've benefited for a long time in paying 5-cent Marvin taxes and not 26 to 48-cent Waxhaw taxes.
There is another thing that we are just talking about right now, but it has been proposed in the past. It's called conditional annexation. Nobody wants to volunteer to pay a tax. We understand that. Then they look to what you're saying. What value am I getting for it? For us, you got to provide services. Services would be responding to get your roads done. The other service was the garbage service. Now we've taken 3 or 4, I'm sorry?
And the sheriffs.
The sheriffs. But our goal was to take 4 different companies, waste hauling companies, off the roads, and they're coming one day now, not 3 or 4 different days, because depending on what company everybody chooses. So we were successful in that. But this conditional thing, I'm learning that we can possibly do it locally. It doesn't have to be state. And we're trying through WUMA, which is Western Union County Municipal Alliances, trying to convince them to make this a local bill. Meaning, you decide to sell your house, okay? And you're in a unincorporated Union County, but we would love to see you in Marvin. And let's just talk this neighborhood right over there. They sell their house. That guy from New York comes down and he buys the house. It wasn't Marvin before, but with that deed change, that automatically imposes what's called an annexation. I still, to this day, have not seen a reason why that wouldn't work, because it's not you ever paying the tax. In fact, if you were to pass away and your spouse still lived in the house, no changes because there was no deed change. But we're looking at things like that, trying to figure out how do we access can this be a state thing, or do we just make it a local thing? Nobody wants to volunteer or pay a tax, but to Jamie's point, as their roads deteriorate, or if they have issues, they're gonna take their HOA president and go talk to the state or the county. We have power in numbers with Western Union County Municipal. This is one of those things that we're talking about. How it gets done, I'm all ears because I want to learn, because I'd love to see that in place in Marvin, because they're getting representation without taxation right now. My favorite story of all time is when we got the phone call before this middle roundabout was put in, and those volunteer officers were directing traffic, and we got a call into the office, where are those officers? And we responded kindly to the Waxhaw resident that those officers are there on a voluntary basis, and you're welcome, because it's the Marvin residents that paid for that, which in fact led to probably, in some extent, extending when they got done, because DOT would look at these roads as critical intersections, and if we weren't having accidents and body bags, it didn't get elevated. We argued we're putting officers on there so we didn't have that happen. So we were trying to get ahead of that. So there's some things we're looking at, and we love ideas. So if you have an idea about what we could do, it's just hard to get someone to volunteer to pay a tax. That's on the state now. They basically told us, you can't force annex anymore. John did a great job of going around the neighborhoods years ago, and Waxhaw actually, I believe, came to us and said, you can't do that. And they said, no, you don't understand. They volunteered to be a part of Marvin, because if you have a choice at 5 cents at the time or 38 cents at the time, you were going Marvin all day long. So we want to start providing services. We want to elevate. As I was saying, very often when you lower your standards, you'll meet those standards. We want to elevate our standards. We're in a nice neighborhood. We want to be able to respond to all of you on how fast can we get that road finished or repaired if something were to happen.
Hey, real quick, while you were chatting, I actually pulled to the gentleman in the back that asked the question about the roads and the cost of construction. I just pulled a contract that we entered with DOT in 2019 for Heritage Oak, Firethorn, and they're calling this Beechwood, but yeah, Beechwood. And the numbers on there, just for comparison purposes, Heritage Oak was a full-depth reclamation. They basically took the entire road up, pulled it up, threw it away, and built it back down. They had a lot of water penetration and issues on that road. So that's the big dog road. That was $260,676 per mile. Firethorn and Beechwood were profile mills, which is typically what you're going to see in Marvin. Those are basically, you grind it up and you put a little profile mill back in, a little filling mill. That was $153,000 per mile in Beechwood and $164,226 in Firethorn. So that gives you some comparable numbers. No, that was in what was July of 2019.
So if you compare the 250,000 per mile for a mill and fill now to the 153,000 5 years ago, that's about what it's gone up, about 100,000 a mile in this rapid inflation environment that we've had in the last 5 years. It's not typical inflation, much higher as we all know. So if you compare that, it's an extra 100,000 to dig them out if the road base is really bad. So.
First, I'd just like to say thank you to the council for the information tonight and for all that you do for our community. I've been impressed by what you have put together as information, and I appreciate you going through it in detail tonight. I think it's important for me personally as a resident to clarify just the dollars one more time. So worst case scenario, $20 million at 5.3%. That's the taxes would go up that you've illustrated in the worst case scenario. Is that correct? Yes. So let's say you spend $13 million and not $20 million. Our taxes are not going up this full amount.
That's correct.
Only the amount that's spent.
That's correct.
Can you say that? Can you say that one more time? Because there are people in this room that think that we're pulling 20 million and we're paying the worst case scenario. And there are a lot of, I run into them all the time.
I know.
And I have to explain that. And that's why I give them the explanation of the home equity line, because we're not, and so that brings up the point, when you. No. Okay, so when we go to the
Here,
bond.
I'll say it for you.
We go to the bond.
Let me say it for you as a resident, because I do understand what you're saying. So $20 million is the worst-case scenario to do the work that they've analyzed in that plan from 2020. That is inflated, obviously, but that's the guidelines that they have to do and have to use to meet the standard that the state government has put out there. So 20 million is the worst-case scenario at the 5.3%. But if you only use $13 million of that, our taxes only go up the appropriate amount for the 13 million spent at the interest rate you get it at. Correct?
Yes, that's correct,
All right,
absolutely.
So if I have a $500,000 tax value home, the worst case scenario is the taxes are going to go up about $537,000 or $537 a year, right? If I do that math correctly. But if you only use 13 million and it's at 3%, it's likely going to be half that or 2/3 of that, right? Okay. All right. So that's the math that I wanted to make sure I was clear on, because I don't want my taxes to go up either. But I'm willing to pay for that for these two important reasons. It's going to improve the community. And I think what we're missing here is there's a lot of kids in this community. I have a 10-year-old and a 7-year-old now. So the greenways are very important to me. But we've talked a lot about the roads tonight and about repaving a road. I agree with repaving the roads when they need to be repaved. But how about the safety of a crosswalk for my children to cross from Saddle Avenue, which I live on, over to Firethorn to visit their friends? If I understand correctly, if we manage that road, we can put a proper crosswalk there for safety
Yes, sir.
purposes.
Yep.
Am I clear on that?
Yes. In fact, that happened with Marvin, Marvin School. Well, actually, there was a death about a year and a half ago maybe, on Joe Carr. And Marvin Creek came to us and said, hey, this is crazy. We got kids, we want a safe passage. They came to us, we looked at it, it was $150,000 or more, I think, at the time, and it was over 10% of our budget. This is the kind of stuff that we can go in there and say, we can put a median in there, we can put stop signs like Jamie said. Right now, they're not our roads. We can control the speed, but we couldn't do it just because, and they didn't have the money in their neighborhood to participate, so we weren't able to address that.
So again, for me, road condition and the health of the road is important. But what I'm hearing you say is that pedestrian safety and the other things that are really more important than a pothole, in my opinion, are included in this. And if you own the roads, you have the ability to dictate how those roads are traveled on, the size of trucks that are on those roads, the speed limit of those roads, and all that stuff is under your control, under our control as the community of Marvin. Am I correct?
Absolutely.
Okay.
So just an example too, my neighborhood, Providence Estates, is right next to Sandy Ridge, and the Chimneys, which aren't in Marvin, are right there as well. But they both go to the same school. If my kids need to go for a play date or something like that, there could be options where you could have a greenway that goes 100 yards through the woods, rather than parents having to throw their kids in the car and drive 3 miles around and back, and then to pick them up and back. So that's part of the reason why we included greenways and things like that along with the roads. But just an example of kind of what you're talking about, making it safer for people to connect.
So the finances are worst case scenario, and there's pedestrian safety and other community health improvements that are being focused on here, not just gaining control of the roads. Okay.
Absolutely.
Well, I appreciate you letting me speak, and thank you again for all that you're doing for our community.
Good evening. Oh, there you go. We talked about, you were saying when it comes to the greenways, maybe some easements would be more difficult than others. Do we know which ones, for example? maybe is along Newtown and Waxhaw Marvin more difficult compared?
Well, clearly the ones that are North Carolina DOT owned are going to be more, if we can't take over those roads, trying to get those easements are going to be a little more challenging. Not to say that they can't be done.
Yep.
And we have a pretty good idea when we start looking at the loop there. Obviously, when you get to Providence Road and you're looking at that part,
Right.
those are something that, it's on the project list and it's on that list. Is it going to happen? I can't sit here and say that it will, and I can't sit here and say that it won't. So, but it's just, we're just trying to, again, put all of that together. As I said, in the master plan, we had to have a basis for the trails and the numbers. And unfortunately, we had to turn to the master plan. And again, the numbers are exorbitant. They're inflated. And some of them that are in there, we know that there's a possibility we can't do it, but we didn't want to leave any off because we know that there are people going, well, why didn't you put mine in there? We didn't include me. Why didn't I get this? So we're just trying to be as as encompassing as we possibly can.
And then whether people would find it pleasing or not along the main power transportation lines, which sort of would Weddington Chase, us, and others, is that an option at all, or just strictly, our large transmission lines that kind of cut right through, take us away from the roads?
So, John and I were both on PRG for many years before we got on council, and that was one of the main topics that we talked about when we were looking at the master plan as it's been developed. Yes, the transmission lines, we've had conversations with Duke Energy. They are very much proponent of doing greenways along those easements. They have their restrictions because they need to have access to their lines. Past that, they've actually lessened some of their restrictions to make it easier. The big issue with the power lines is that it cuts through the middle of people's properties. And so there are people who are hesitant about giving easements along those. We would love to have it. It's in the master plan, and it would be a tremendous, wide open, great way to traverse the village of Marvin from Providence Road to Waxhaw Marvin Road at the state line there. It'd be an awesome trail if we could get all the easements. But that is a huge undertaking and could be quite prohibitive trying to get those easements. So when we looked at this transportation plan, we looked at what was going to connect the most effect. We know that Providence Road is going to be done by NCDOT. That's in their plan for the road widening project. We know that Broadmoor is doing that portion of the trail on Waxhaw Marvin Road. We know several pieces are getting done in that plan, so that's going to come off of the total borrow. So there are reasons why we picked that, but the main whole thing is connectivity from one far reach of the village to the other far reach of the village, trying to get connectivity so that we can reduce traffic and make it safer for our citizens to traverse the village.
Yeah, and I think one thing on top of that is people look at our master plan and there's more potential connections and things like that that are even shown on it now that could be years down the line. But we've always tried to do it by working with individual residents and having these things done voluntarily. We haven't been a council that's into eminent domain and taking people's property to put in a trail or things like that. And essentially, when we have an issue where we don't know that we're going to get that trail, we don't necessarily just take it off the map, because the truth is some residents like these plans and trails, some don't, and the houses change over. So where you might have 4 neighbors that would have to give an easement, you might have 3 but not have 1. But that person could be moving in 2, 3, 10 years, So we don't like to take things off of that master plan because we're trying to have a vision for Marvin for the long term, the next 30, 50 years. And if you start taking everything off, you got nothing to really work with in the future.
Gotcha. And final question, where's the parcel of land that we're maybe looking at teaming up with Waxhaw? And then finally, Go Heels.
I'm a Duke fan. You beat.
You might have
beat-
just lost an
you
election.
beat us. Now, if you go down Waxhaw Marvin Road, as soon as you cross over, you'll see a sign that says Waxhaw. And if you look over, there's an open field there. Now, the good news is they've approached us about it. The better news is they don't want that piece of property developed. They could sell that to a developer like that and it would be developed, but they don't want it developed. We obviously don't want it developed. So there's some synergy there of being able to do that and having we've needed a sports complex forever. We've always had to rely on WCWAA and, to go down to, Weddington to do it, but, again, it's just.
It's a floodplain.
It's out there, but whether it happens or not, we'll see how that goes. We'll just,
Do you know where St. Matthew's South Campus is? As you're driving that way, just before it on the right side, you'll see a brick wall and some trees lining right down. 36 acres. All of us have walked it on the permission of Waxhaw. It's beautiful, it has a little lake in it too, so.
Many years, I remember them playing pee-wee football out there 15, 20 years ago. They had like a little field out there.
And that piece of parcel does abut Marvin. So it does touch Marvin.
yes, sir.
Good evening.
Thank you.
Appreciate the presentation tonight. And transportation issues are fierce on our end of the county, where 85% of the people of Union County live west of Rocky River Road. I was the former MUMPO rep, which is now CRPTO, and I know the alliances that we had to have at one time just to make a honorable representation at that board, because it's weighted with Charlotte and Mecklenburg County getting most of the votes, so we had to kind of stick together. One of the things, and I think the Western Union County Alliance is good. I hope the participation is good, because that's the one thing that we have in our corner is for the western side of Union County, where most of the growth is occurring, to be together when they go to the CRPTO meetings and have the priorities that are fierce here in western Union County. One of the things, just going to roll out there, possibility, you mentioned the neighborhoods around that are not a member or a part of Marvin at the present time. I'm not sure if the town has considered the extraterritorial jurisdiction, which allows the town to control the zoning up to a mile outside of its corporate limits. They can benefit from the managing expertise of Marvin over, say, 4 or 5 years, and at some point down the road, the benefit to those neighborhoods that have turned their nose up at the prospects of becoming a part of Marvin might just turn the other way. And by showing the good management skills and expertise of the council, planning board in the town of Marvin, that'll be the best example that they can have, and the town will benefit from it down the road in the future when they need the town instead of the other way around right now. Just a suggestion.
And by the way, thank you for serving on that board. I've served on it too. It has changed. It was MUMPO or something is what they called it.
Union
Yeah.
Metropolitan
Yeah.
Planning Organization, yeah. You needed big elbows to represent your
Yeah.
town on that board.
And you're right, we're outnumbered over there. We do stick together. We talk with other municipalities in Stallings, Wesley Chapel,
Yeah.
Weddington.
Yeah.
We're all voting we're all in line with what the goal is, but we're, kind of we don't get a lot of attention, but now we're getting more.
Well, we had to stick together because the weighted voting that they used then, and I'm sure they still use it.
Yes, sir.
It was at our disadvantage. So by having the town stick together, our prospects and our priorities have a much better chance.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I don't think that's on.
Is it on now?
I think it is now.
Do you guys actually have a list of the priority projects that you can share with us? If if the bonds are passed?
Do you mean like the prioritization of the projects that they have?
Correct.
That be you're referring to the roads
If you
or
wanna-
just?
Like both. If it's approved, what are you going to start with?
She's basically saying on the project list, what is your 1, 2, 3, 4? So if you want to go back to the project list on the slides,
Neighborhood roads would be top priority. Connector roads, the easy connector roads would be along with that kind of, there's gonna be 2 phases of roads. Phase 1, neighborhood roads. Then the easier connector roads, which is gonna be Marvin School Road, Marvin Road, Newtown Road, Joe Carr Road, Tom Short Road. With Newtown Road and Marvin School Road, we are going to have to get an SR3 form signed by the Gates of Ainsley and Providence Down South in order for them to say, we understand that DOT is no longer, quote-unquote, maintaining our roads and that the Village of Marvin will be doing that. But we'll try to get those first. The other roads, we don't have to get the SR3 forms because everything else abuts Marvin. So those, in terms of roads, those will all be our first pass.
What about the roundabout?
We secured the easements over at Joe Carr,
No,
correct?
she's talking about the Bonds Grove Church.
Oh,
in Waxhaw
that
Marvin.
one, okay.
I mean, we can't move up the construction of that. That is
No, I
without
understand.
our,
But will that be, is that a priority?
I mean, yeah.
Yeah,
I mean,
it's- the
when
bond
they.
is passed.
It's
Hold on.
not
If-
our road right now, but
When they ask us for money, if the bonds pass and they ask us for money, then we will give them what money that they are asking for at the time. Is that the question that you're asking? I mean, we're not just going to hand them a check for $840,000 if the bonds pass.
No, what I'm asking is, if the bonds pass, 1, 2, 3, what are your priorities? Like, where does that fit in your list of priorities?
That's going to fit in when the state does the project. We have no control of that. It's a priority for us to fund it, but we can't do anything about the timeline on it. It'll get done when the state says we're going to do it. They're in the engineering phase now. They still have to do land acquisition, and that is a very long time process to do before they can do construction. So as far as our priorities go, it's high priority for us. It's just that we can't do anything about it until they say they're ready to do it. So they have pressure on them from the county, from us, from CRTPO, everybody to do it when they're saying they're going to do it. So hopefully it'll get done when they say, because of the widening project on Providence Road.
I would add to that, that's a project that's being shared by multiple different organizations, the state, the county, and Marvin. So that would be a priority if the bonds pass, because we've got matching, if we don't put our part in, they're not going to put their part in. Also, when it comes to some of the grants that we've received, assuming we get the bonds, the GO bond passed, that makes it much easier for us to provide our matches for that $750,000. So those projects that are covered under the grants would be a natural priority as well.
So what happens if the bonds don't pass? Are you all able to turn around, since you've already done the legwork for roads, and do another bond referendum in November?
Well, I don't think we can do a bond referendum that quickly. That's not something that would happen. We'd have to go through a whole process again.
do you want to take that?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's about a 7 to 8 month lead time to do a bond referendum. So we would, by the time March comes around and we're looking out to a referendum in November, we would probably be a little bit behind the 8 ball. It would be a scramble to get it done. It's going to be additional costs on the village to run the whole process again. So it's not unfeasible to do it, but it might beg the question, well, if it didn't pass in March, why are we just going right back to the voters 8 months later, incurring additional costs with the likelihood that it may not pass just because of prior history? So it is possible to go back for a referendum again. Probably not the best approach, I would say.
Well, it seems to be a hot button with a lot of residents, standalone. So I would just throw that out. One other question. So if we don't end up spending the whole $20 million, how will you guys adjust the tax rate given the fact that you don't know right now how much you're actually going to spend? Is it going to stay as it is?
It will only
Until you
go
know.
up as we borrow it. So as it stands right now, if the GO bond passes, nothing changes until we borrow the first tranche of money, which would be in the fall. And that would be raised according to how much we pull when we have all of our estimates in for the projects that we are definitely going to do on the first tranche.
And the interest rate. So you got two factors. So we can't sit here today and tell you your taxes are gonna increase X, because we don't know the interest rate and we don't know exactly how much we're gonna pull. We have a pretty good idea. So once we get that first pull, that is when your adjustment to your taxes takes place. And it's based on those two factors.
But we don't know really what it's going to.
Well, we,
That was an example that was given.
yeah, we're probably looking at that first pull to be, if they both pass, you're probably looking at about 7 million pulled, and for transportation, and the other 4 million for parks and rec. So you're pulling that at whatever interest rate. The biggest one that kind of has more, kind of leeway in it is that second pull, because then, by that time, we will have been able to look at all the projects, the feasibility of all the projects, and what's left of that. So that second one, instead of being the 7 million that finishes out the 20, that one could be 3 million. And trust me, I'm like everyone in here, I don't want to pay an extra tax. I don't want to pay any taxes. But I also don't want to live in a community that's just going to let itself run down. I can't stand when I go, and I tell this on every presentation, they give me a hard time about it. You cross over Mecklenburg County coming into Marvin, into Union County and Marvin. Marvin city limit. That looks like something, I grew up on a tobacco farm in eastern part of North Carolina, and that looks like something they would put up, because they don't care. They're just a community that says, here we are. That's embarrassing.
It is, but $700,000 budgeted for signs is,
Again, that's a great point. $700,000. Now, what we're talking about, when we went to do that, we had to budget. How did we come up with that number? We went to them and we have to, for presentation purposes, we have to price out every project one by one. There's no economies of scale. So that sign that says, "Welcome to Marvin," that really nice sign that says, "Welcome to Marvin," if we pay for one of them, let's say it's, and I don't know the number, let's say it's $100,000. But if we do 5 of them, and the main arteries coming into Marvin, that number then goes from 100,000 to 70,000. So we're grabbing economies of scale, and that's what's not factored into here. We can tell you about it, but it's not factored into here. So the wayfinding signs, listen, I go to other communities and you can look and they go, you know what, they got nice signs, they got nice roads, they got nice, because someone asked me about, well, it's gonna bring the price of our property, our house prices down. And I go, how could that be? Because you're investing in your community. So when you put your house up for sale, you say, great schools, nice roads, greenways and trails, and all the amenities that you're getting from this is part of that package. And so, again, do I want to see that big sign, the 700? Do I think it's going to be that? Do I think it's going to be that? I don't think it's going to be close.
I got it, but you're asking us to vote on worst-case scenario, so
Because that's
We're
what
required
And I
to.
understand that,
We're-
I understand that,
you
but
have to
that's a big
understand,
number.
We're required to do that, but we are just trying to do everything we can to give you the option, the opportunity, the vehicle to get to all of the things that we've listed here. And again, I don't want those numbers. I don't like those numbers either. Like I said, it'd be disingenuous of me to stand up here and say that they are. This council, as this council sits now, wants to get these projects done. As Kim has joked before, if it were up to her and this would all pass, we'd shut Marvin down and do all of the roads, do all the paths, do all the signs and everything. And when you come back in, you go, wow, this is really nice. But we can't do that. So we have to do it kind of step by step and work through the process that way.
Angel, I want to add something too, because this is, in 10 years that I've been here, 10 years, we've raised taxes one time, and that's been a penny. The naysayers would say, you wrote. Right, but Marvin has raised taxes from 5 cents to 6 cents. Well, we went from in 10 years. We, 20%, yes. It's 20%, yes, that's the naysayer. So it's the $100 in the year. That was done based on the survey we had. The community clearly wanted another officer. And that officer cost about $120,000. If we raise taxes 1 penny, we bring in, through ad valorem, approximately $160,000. So if we were to raise taxes 10 cents, worst case scenario, if with the bond is 10 cents, but if we raised it 10 cents, all we would generate for that year is $1.6 million. Again, going back to economies of scale, when we're trying to negotiate, we don't have a roads department with trucks and all of that. We currently have to wait until DOT is in the area. We work with them, we see the projects and say, okay, this is the next one we want you to do. They move equipment, there's costs associated with that. So we're looking at it a little different too, that, you know, we could raise taxes 2, 3 cents, whatever, what that's gonna be, but that same amount of tax is only gonna generate $1.6 million on that.
Yeah, and I think an important point too, if we were to just vote to raise the taxes next year, all of that burden of that investment that we would be doing, which would be far less than what we could do with the GO bond, is gonna fall on the current taxpayers, not the future taxpayers that either build homes or move in over the next 20 years. Because many of you, once your children get out of school, like happens a lot of times around here, people move out of Marvin and may go to another area, go to the beach or wherever. But, you know, that's one of the other nice things is it's not just the current taxpayers that are footing the whole bill, it's the future taxpayers that are being more distributed. Because as we add more homes, there's not a lot to be built out in Marvin, but there's still more to come. And each dollar that those new homes are contributing helps to kind of defray the costs that all of the rest of us are having to pay now.
You had a question?
Yeah, another question, thank you. I realize you guys like to talk, so that's a couple things. You made a representation that's most conservative, unlikely, and inflated tonight. Is that a fair statement? Regarding the cost, the interest rates, dollars spent. You've used those words, correct? I'm asking you. And I'm just going to ask each of the board members, have you made similar representations at any of the homeowners meetings? Conservative, unlikely, or inflated? I'll go around the board. I think you're a council member?
Yes.
Just nod if you've done that representation for me.
That
the numbers are most conservative, unlikely to be spent, or the numbers are inflated. If you've made that representation at any of the homeowners meetings, just nod, yes or no.
I think we've made the representation of how those numbers were come up with.
Yeah, just you use qualifiers as inflated, most conservative.
This isn't a poll.
No, that's fine.
I'm just trying to be respectful of what you're saying.
No, you guys just talked for like 5 minutes about taxes.
I understand, but this isn't.
It's a question and answer. I'm asking a question. I'm giving the board members an opportunity to answer.
What is your question?
My question is, at any of the homeowners meetings, have you made the representation that the bonds are most conservative, costs are inflated, what's the other word? Unlikely to be spent. It's a really simple question.
I think we have. Unlikely to be spent because there are projects in there that we know are already paid for.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Similarly? Yes? Made the similar representations? No? Thank you, Wayne. Thank you, Wayne. What about the rest of the board?
Oh, I have.
Okay, perfect. Yep. Sure. Thank you. That's all I wanted. There you go. Yeah, he was up.
Hello, everyone. Thanks for coming tonight, everybody. And I just have a couple questions, and that is to the group, okay? These guys have put something out here that we all have listened to for a couple hours now. I read it over and over again before I got here, and I heard the same thing that I already read. It's solidified in my mind that we should be doing this because it's costing us $3 a day max. Does anyone here say that I blew $3 today on something I didn't need? Absolutely I did, okay? If I did not, and you say you didn't, then you're probably lying to yourself. Secondly, if this is not something you want them to do, no one has come up with any solution besides this. So we can poke holes in this all day long, but does someone else have a solution for this? Because I'm solution-minded. This is a solution that I think works for us, because over the long haul, we're going to pay this one way or another. We might as well get it on the books now, and let's get this thing moving forward. Anybody who thinks differently, I want to know what your choice is. What do we have? Is there something that we can do differently? Please bring it up now. I'd be happy to hear it, because you could change my mind. But at this point, nobody has changed my mind, because it's nothing but anger. And quite frankly, it's making me angry because it makes no sense. If somebody can talk me out of it, great. Let's do it.
I have not heard a lot. I've been sitting here the
Thank
whole
you.
time. One word, it's
Okay, one conversation. Go ahead, sir.
Oh, thank you for the chance to speak, and appreciate your time. What I'm curious about in the whole process are the either intended or unintended consequence of, we've spent a good hour and a half discussing 25% of the bond package, which is all transportation. And it seems to be a more appropriate approach for the council to take in this is the thing that people are really interested in. Nobody said anything about building a park next door. Nothing. And so I don't understand the logic of not putting the transportation bond, which is really a greenway bond, really, because that's half of the total bond package and 2/3 of the transportation and greenway bond. Why you didn't separate that out to present a bond to the community that is the burning issue that people want to address. So I want to just comment, and I know there's not an answer, and that's fine, to half of the proposed bond package, which is, oh golly, we don't need nearly that much money. What's the process then for deciding how much money is going to be needed to execute the Greenway, which is half of the total bond package, and nobody's asked you that question? And so again, I think it's inappropriate for the council to have not had a separate bond package on transport and the transportation one, because that's what people are really interested in, and there is much discussion, but we haven't talked about 3/4 of the bond package this evening.
Someone want to tackle that?
Go ahead. I don't know if there was a question in there.
Well, there
because-
is. It's how do we decide 10 million is way too much money?
I think I can answer that one. I'm new to council, but I did spend the last 12 years on the Parks, Recreation, and Greenways Board. So when you look at the proposed trail, and he's got the master plan for the greenways and so forth, you'll actually see where it's detailed out line by line, the specific individual sections of all of those trails and their associated costs that were projected when they did that master plan in 2020. So it's not showing it up there section by section, but for example, Bonds Grove and Waxhaw Marvin to Providence Road is a section. And each one of those is priced out individually in the master plan here. So all of that supporting information is available through the village website on this master plan. And again, when we had to look at all of those individual components, that's where they can get inflated, because if you're able to do multiple components at the same time, you can get better economies of scale.
And then do we have an idea of which one of those? So then do we have a general idea of which one of those, if we ranked them from unlikely to likely to a slam dunk, in terms of ranking those for feasibility? So then, again, that gives an indication of the likelihood that that money would be dispersed.
Well, I
So,
touched on that earlier, and I mentioned that the Broadmoor section of Waxhaw Marvin Trail is going to be provided by the builder. So that's a significant section of trail which is on there. It's going to be done by the builder, so we're not going to have to pay for that.
Thank you. So, and that's cool. That's wonderful. So as a taxpayer who is interested in making an educated decision, how do I know that?
We told you at the presentation,
how much-
we've said
well,
it
how-
at every presentation,
Well, how
actually.
much money is that? And take it off the list. And then don't show it in the presentation as a potential disbursement.
You have to understand, we get one bite of the apple here to do these bonds. I just told you in the presentation.
Yep.
I said, we said, okay, part of it is, I mean, you did the survey, people want greenways. They want greenways and trails. How do we have a basis for greenways and trails? The only basis that we have is the master plan. In the master plan, it lists out all of the greenways and all the trails and all of that, and it has pricing in there. If you look at the pricing that's in here, they'll tell you that it's a set cost. It's a set-
No,
it's a
you
set
missed
formula.
my point.
It's a blanket formula.
You missed my point.
No, I got you.
No,
I got your
for the
point.
the
But here-
reason, no,
when you
excuse
say
me.
priority, the list is here, we have the list. This list, as we go by, as I said before in the presentation, some of these trails, that trail on the very end, right there, all likelihood, that's probably not gonna happen. What determines this, we know that there's a pricing that goes to it, but to get to that, we have to get the right-of-ways, the easements, and all the pieces to it. Some of it, if we don't get the roads from NCDOT, that may go away. So there are a lot of variables in this plan, but for us, we get one bite at the apple to do all of this.
And my first question was, what's the process? No, wait, let me finish,
Okay.
please.
Okay.
My first question was, what's the process for the council, assuming the bonds pass, for determining how much money you need to pull for half of the bond package when we, let me finish. Let me finish. For half of the bond package, but we don't know what it's going to be, and we recognize that some of this won't be attainable. My first question was, what's the process? So I'm asking a process question, not a financial question.
Can I answer that?
Yes, please.
Okay, great, thank you. If the bonds pass, like Jamie said, and I do joke, that I would shut down the village and get everything done immediately. What that means is we will go out to bid for it. We'll put together an RFP, RFQ for all these projects that we want to get done, and it'll have to go out for bid. So the people that will do the work are going to come back and say, here are the bids, here's how much it's going to cost, and that's what we're going to have to go off of.
No,
And that's
I'm
what-
sorry, but what I just heard was, many of these projects aren't going to be ready for bid because there are other issues that need to be resolved.
We can go out.
Procurement first. We would get the easements and then. do
And
the
so we
bids.
got to do easements, we got to get right-of-ways.
Right.
So I'm asking a procedural question. So we're not ready to bid.
Hunter, do you want to
Well,
answer that
Part of
one?
this is that if we don't get the roads, which is an important part of this, there are places along the trail that are not going to be feasible because we aren't going to have the ability to get right-of-ways. If we own the roads and we have the right-of-ways already because we own the roads, then some of those sections will be available, but without both of them, they can't work. So there's a coexistence with some of these projects, okay?
And there are some trails that are close by that we've already identified as some that are kind of that low-hanging fruit. Okay, we've already got some of the easements and right-of-ways, and we already know kind of what the cost is going to be. So that would probably be in that first pool of funds from a Greenway and Trail standpoint.
We do have 7 years.
Appreciate the time. First of all, I thank the council. You guys put a lot of time into this, which I appreciate. I know you spend a lot of nights and weekends doing this. Staff as well, Christina, you work very hard at doing this. So I appreciate the time you guys put into it. You're very sincere in what you guys are trying to do, and I appreciate that. My name's Gary Rose. I live at 1209 Lark Ridge. And I guess I consider myself a relatively informed citizen. I've heard this presentation twice now. I go to coffee with council. I listen to most meetings online. I met with Christina last week for more information about the bonds and taxes, so I consider myself a relatively informed citizen. And I try to enter this process with an open mind. You know, the things that the village wants to do, the bond package, and so I had an open mind to it, and I came to a conclusion. I'm against this. And I'll tell you why. I got 3 reasons against it. The first one is our country has a problem with debt. The federal debt's $34.2 trillion. It's $100,000 per person. $34 trillion. I can't control the federal debt. The state spends a lot of money. I can't control that as well. On the local level, my voice is about this loud. But I do have a voice. I don't think we should do more debt on our community. Our current debt's roughly $1 million for this building, which is fine. The annual budget's roughly $3 million for our town, for our village. So we're going to put $20 million of debt on a $3 million budget. Seems excessive. So that's reason number 1. I'm against the debt. How are we going to spend the money? So I look at the presentation. There's the road bond and there's the greenway bond. So the total bond's $20 million. $9.9 million are for greenways. 9.89 miles. It's $1 million a mile for the greenway. $1 million a mile. Now the roads a couple years ago were $280,000 a mile for roads. That's the biggest part of this bond. It's 49%. $1 million a mile. The roads, $4.7 million. Now, we spend a lot of time talking about roads, and I think we're in agreement that roads are a situation we probably should do the roads. But that's not what this bond is about. That's 23%. So basically, we've been given a $20 million bond with $4.7 million for roads, which is what we need. It's 23%. The next biggest category, the Village Park, $4 million. $4 million. We'll have a nice amphitheater. It's a Village Park. Future projects, $1 million. Okay, not sure what those projects are, but it's $1 million we're going to vote on. The last bucket is wayfinding signs. $700,000 for wayfinding signs for the town of Marvin. Let's see, there's Publix, there's Village Hall, there's Eford Park, there's a country club. It's about $200,000 per sign, per location. That's crazy. So I look at the bond, needs versus wants. I mean, you guys have described this as your Christmas wish list. A Christmas wish list. You don't get everything you want for Christmas. I'd love to see the roads as a separate package. But a Christmas wish list for $20 million? Now, I hear the argument, we're not going to spend the money. This is conservative. So I go to Business 101, get it in writing. And you guys have presented this in writing, $20 million. I look at the sample ballot, and Kim read it. It's a blank check. It has to be for transportation. It has to be parks and recs. It's a pretty wide definition as I read the sample ballot. Now, I can read it again, but it's a blank check. Now,
Gary, I didn't read the ballot. Those were state statutes.
Okay.
But go ahead.
well, let me read the ballot. Okay, the transportation bond. Pay the capital cost of acquiring, constructing, reconstructing, widening, extending, paving, resurfacing, grading, and improving streets and roads, including private roads and roads that are responsible to the state, sidewalks and greenways, including without limitation, related studies, plans, design, improving and relocating utilities, constructing and improving intersections, curbs, gutters, drains, bridges, overpasses, crossings, safety measures, and streetscape. acquiring and installing lighting, traffic control, signals, and signs, and acquiring land, rights-of-ways, and easements in land required therefore. That sounds like a blank check to me. Now, I could read the Parks and Recs, it's kind of the same thing. We're not going to spend the money. I've never seen a government entity at the federal level, the state level, or local level did not spend every dollar they had. Now, it may not be this council, but there's future councils. So my guess is the $20 million will be spent. I have no doubt about that. It's about needs versus wants. Taxes. Now, there's a tax component to this. I moved to Marvin in 2019. My taxes have gone up 4 times. Okay, the tax rate went from 5 cents to 6 cents in 2020. The county had a reevaluation in 21. Now, the council had a choice to make that a revenue neutral reevaluation, i.e. any increase in revenue we offset by a lower tax rate. Choose not to do that. So my taxes went up then. 2022, a vehicle tax, $25 per vehicle. Most people have 2 vehicles, that's $50. 2022, we had the waste fee, $244. Now, we got something out of that. I don't dispute that. We now have waste service. It was a win for some people, a lose for others. But I'll tell you, my taxes have gone up 4 times since I've lived here. Tax rate only went once. Taxes went up 4 times. Okay, these bonds pass. Tax rate's going to go up right now it's 6 cents. It's going to go up next year 8 cents, another 8 cents. We're going to have a countywide reevaluation next year. They're going to reevaluate our prices, our properties. Taxes are going to go up again. Now, the council has a choice of making that revenue neutral. Didn't do it in 21, didn't do it in 17. My guess is probably never been done in the history of Marvin. So my guess is we will have a tax increase from the reevaluation. Taxes are going to go up in 2018 or 2028, another 2.75 cents. So the tax rate will go from 6 cents to 16.75 cents. But if you add in the county reevaluation, our taxes are going to increase 3.4 times. 3.4 times. It's not double. That's a heck of a lot of money. I mean, this is not New York. This is not California. But we're going down that path. So in conclusion, I'm against this, and I don't have a question at this point. When I look at the debt and the spending and the taxes, for those 3 reasons, I'm against this. Thank you.
So what is the impact of the maintenance expense on all this? No one's really covered any of that and how any ongoing maintenance is going to be paid for and what that might look like as a percentage on 20 million?
Yeah, I can answer it. So we don't know the maintenance cost in 20 years. We don't know what maintenance cost of 25 roads in 20 years is going to be. What this council has committed to is putting an allocation of a certain dollar amount into the maintenance of roads so that they can diversify PAL bill dollars plus general fund dollars into a allocation of preventative maintenance and restorative maintenance. So basically what they're looking at is putting 2 different buckets of money in for preventative and then restorative maintenance to cover roads from a preventative maintenance standpoint, that crack seal, that fog seal to preserve the integrity and the life of the roads, to prolong the life of the roads, and then putting a certain dollar amount in for those restorative processes, the mill and fill, the profile, digging it up, and then putting that overlay back on. We have absorbed in the model an increase, and I don't know if Chazo, you want to pull it up and show. There are some portions of revenues that are built up that we can put back into the maintenance. So council actually decided to keep these revenues in, this kind of surplus, that we could use that for maintenance when those needs arise. So currently, we do 100% of our POW bill dollars for transportation, which means road maintenance, greenway maintenance. That's about $167,000 per year. We have dipped a lot more into general fund dollars. I think this year, Jill, you can correct me if I'm wrong, I think this year we put about $400,000 in. So it just depends on the needs of the year and what projects come up, but currently we budget around $167,000 at the very least in road maintenance.
So would we have the money in the budget to cover the maintenance expense, or would that be an additional tax increase to cover the maintenance expense?
Can you speak to
So the way that the bonds are amortized over a 20-year period. The first payment of principal and interest is going to be your highest payment, and that's going to step down every year. And so the way that the current property tax estimates are sized, they are sized to generate revenues sufficient to cover that first year payment. So as your payments step down every year, and presumably as the assessed value within the village increases, the value of each of those pennies is going to increase. And so the combination of the reduction in your principal and interest payments over year, combined with the increase in the value of that 1 cent on the tax rate, is going to generate excess revenues above and beyond what you need to cover your principal and interest payments on the loan. So the plan at the moment is to use that excess money to be put aside to cover operations and maintenance expenses associated with the projects that would be financed.
But if you use all your money, you don't have that money.
We would only use all of the money in year one, but as your payments on your debt step down in years 2 through 20, you have excess funds based on that property tax increase that can be reallocated for those operation and maintenance expenses.
What other questions?
What is your reasoning in not separating the greenways and the bonds? Because I feel like 90%, I don't want to speak for everybody, we all want our streets to be maintained, and it's going to keep the village looking very nice. But why did you guys not separate that? Not all of this, especially with knowing that the greenways, it sounds like right now it's going to be a greenway to nowhere for a while until that's when we figure out a property easement, and then another greenway to nowhere. That is all not figured out yet. So I know you said that you wouldn't want to have time to put another bond on if these don't get approved. But don't you think that it would have been an easier way to get money for the roads to separate those, and why didn't y'all separate those?
Couple of things that I could say, just from my experience on parks and greenways. If you look at how we've already developed the existing ones, that was a combination of investments that the village made, that different developers had kind of contributed to. We plan on continuing to do that in the future, which is why our hope, like Broadmoor, is going to bring those numbers down. But even when we were doing the loop, that kind of goes, it's not complete yet. We're still working to get it down Marvin Road. But if we had never started putting those kind of parts to nowhere in place over the last 12 to 15 years, we'd be nowhere near being able to be as complete as we are now. So, you know, you do have to make investments in greenways and things in little pieces at a time. And unfortunately, that may mean that you have an end that is supposed to connect eventually, but you can only do one section at a time. And the other reason why, a lot of the easements that we'll have that are easier to get are typically in the state DOT right-of-way. So when you have things that are in the state DOT right-of-way, that's another natural reason why you want to combine them with the roads budget, because what you're doing with the roads, as you're improving them, things like that, you may also be doing things in conjunction with the greenways that are in there right-of-way.
My question was, why
And I think you just answered the question. So when we're looking at this, we're looking at it from a transportation standpoint. How do we move people in and around the village of Marvin? So, and some people have greenways already, they don't have roads. So, because the gentleman back there said, well, I don't need this. Well, we didn't do 7,000 different bonds for individuals. So what we're trying to do is we're trying to put everything into a point where there's something for everyone in doing this. And we looked at the transportation and greenways as being a way to move people throughout the community, and it's something for everyone. I've had the question, and it's a legitimate question. It's a great question. If we would have put it with the parks piece, people would have gone, wow, how's the connection there? Why would you do it for the parks? So we determined that we looked at it from how do we move people in and around the community, because it's not just a singular thing. It's not just roads. It's for me, there's many, like Andy, he's right down there. So how does he get to Village Hall, or how does he get to the Heritage District? Well, he can drive, yes, but he can also have a greenway, a trail that takes him from his house, get on a bicycle, motor transportation, and gets him to the Heritage District. So we just looked at it and determined that let's look at it as transportation, and there's something in it for everyone. Some people already have roads. So then you look at it and go, why? I already got roads. I don't need roads. I'm going to vote no on it. So again, trying to put this together for everyone, and again, one bite at the apple.
Hey, can you just speak in the microphone? He's got to take the minute, so I want to make sure he can hear him when he goes back.
So I don't see people using those as modes of transportation, but I do see it as a recreational thing. But I mean, at this point, it doesn't matter because it's already there. But my point was, I was just wondering why. I hear what you said, but I still think it should have been separated. And also, too, in regards to the road bonds, are they going to be used for the proposed commercial area that is supposed to be coming? A lot of people don't want our money to go towards the infrastructure to bring commercial in. So are any of these road bonds going to be used for that money too? Are we paying for the commercial to come here?
Commercial in what way? I'm just,
The supposed tavern?
Heritage District.
Heritage District, yeah.
Are we paying for that to be built?
No.
No. It doesn't fall under the guardrails.
Okay.
Yeah.
So none of the money that we're going to.
What you would likely see is, let's take the Fincher property that has 13 acres, and you'd likely see something where the neighborhood that's just, what is it? Broadmoor, right? Sorry, I forget the names. But that's in their plan, they're gonna build that already. So that now we can take that off, so we're not spending any dollars on that. I use the example of Preserve right across that's on Marvin Road. If you look in front of that neighborhood, it's a pathway to nowhere, and it both ends right there. The developer did that, okay? That wasn't the Village of Marvin. So that's the idea of how we're approaching it. Anything else that gets built, we're gonna want that in the plans on how that incorporates into the greenways, walkways, pathways, like that. So that's part of the build, if you will.
And specifically, if you're talking about the road, which is the section of Newtown Road that would be going through what's known as the Heritage District, with the Village of Marvin being able to take that over, we might make some improvements, but more to be able to control the traffic and to make it safer, not necessarily to pay for amenities or anything like that for the commercial development that might go in there.
Just a bit of information too, for those of you that don't know. South Carolina, we butt up right to South Carolina. Newtown Road that comes from 521 to here, Lancaster County wants to turn that into 4-lane. Okay? We don't have control of that road. North Carolina DOT goes, you know what? They're 4-lane. Why? Sure, why not? We can be 4-lane too. We don't have a say in that. So again, listen, there's so many, there's a ripple effect to all of this. And again, we don't have control over the speed limit. We don't have control over who comes through here. Trucks come through here. You know, we're talking about raising the taxes for, as Gary said, right? You raise my tax for the trash. Yes, sir. You know what? And you know what we saved on you? The other 4 trucks that goes down that road, because there's 4 different carriers that go down there. That part's not talked about. So we take all of these things in consideration. We're just trying to limit the traffic that comes through. I don't want Waxhaw traffic coming through here. We didn't want to pay for the deputies down there. But we also didn't want one of our kids to get killed down there because we didn't pay for them to get Waxhaw to and from work quicker. So, well, again, I understand, and again, what we're trying to do, again, I respect everyone's decision out here. If you vote no, I respect that decision. You have a reason that you voted no. Our job is to give you the vehicle to make a determination and coming to these meetings to make an educated decision. Because nothing I hate more is social media, because I'm not going to get on it. But social media, I had someone say that Firethorn was paved twice in the last 5 years. You know what? You know why they put that on there? Because it helped them get their agenda across. They want you to vote no because they think this council is somehow hiding something or doing something. We're trying to be as transparent as we possibly can. And we're just trying to give you an avenue to vote yes, and I respect it, or vote no, and I respect that. We're trying to also give you, if the yes, the absolute worst case decision, what it's going to cost you. But if you vote no, that last slide has a lot to it. Because we can't, there's a lot of things that we're talking about doing, and it adds to the value of our community. And so I respect it either way.
Couple questions. What will happen once the bonds are paid off? What happens with our tax rate? Does it go back down to 6 cents or?
We can't answer that because in 20 years I won't be here, and I don't know that any one of these council members will be here. However, that's up to that council that's during that time. So in 20 years, when it goes away, you come back in here and you say, don't raise my taxes. And I'll be sitting right there with you going, don't raise my taxes.
Except that we're going to have 10 miles of greenway infrastructure and roads that we have to take care of. So it has been admitted from behind the dais in previous council meetings that our tax rate will not be going back down to 6 cents.
Well, you have
because of the infrastructure that we will be bearing.
Totally understand. But in context, if you sit here to think that our roads we're going to maintain our roads, we're going to do all this stuff at 6 cents, that's kind of disingenuous as well. We can't hold accountable the council in 20 years. They're going to have to look at that. But again, I think when you say that, well, those roads, but again,
those roads are about $3.5 million, $4 million of this bond ask. So I'm wondering what the tax hike would be if you had to raise taxes to pay for that. If the bond doesn't pass, what does that look like? 2 cents? 3 cents? It's not going to be more. We're talking about $20 million at close to 16.75 cents by 2028 if both of these bonds pass. So $3 million would be far less than 6. You see where I'm going with that? So
absolutely.
That's my question. If the bonds don't pass,
Yeah.
if we wanted to do roads, you would have to pay.
Yeah.
There's a likelihood that
No,
taxes
no,
would.
No question. It likely won't go back down to 6. I think that's fair. If I'm going to foretell what's going to happen in 20 years. There's always a saying, once you put a shovel to something, you have to put a budget to it. Okay?
Correct.
So we know what maintenance or repaving a road costs today's dollar. That was pointed out, $250,000. There's a number to what it takes to maintain and repair the greenways and pathways. Fast forward 20 years from now, when this is, if it all gets passed and it all gets done, there's going to be a number associated. What's it going to cost to maintain what we have? And then they look at that based on their income coming in. There may likely be an opportunity to lower the taxes. I'm pretty confident it's not going to go down to 6 cents. That's just me, opinion of one. But again, anytime we put a shovel to anything we do, we have to put a budget to it. Once we put a shovel to this building, we had to put a budget to it. And, we didn't know that. We at least know right now what roads cost in today's dollars to repair and maintain them. We know now, today, in today's dollars, what it costs to maintain, and there's different types of paths too. Some are just crushed concrete, some are different. I would hope that the future council would look at all of that and determine, okay, what's the tax rate that's going to be white? Keeping in mind, there's a lot more homes that are coming in here that are going to be starting to pay into that down the road as well.
Thank you. I just think that's an important point to make, that we're not just paying for bonds, we're paying for a bunch of new infrastructure. I'm particularly interested in the roads. I've made that known. I've always felt like the bonds should have been separated. The one question I have, too, was about phasing. And I listened to the most recent council meeting where Phase 1, Phase 2 were itemized. And Phase 1, we're talking about low-hanging fruit neighborhood roads, sidewalks. I'd still like to know whose sidewalks are going to cost $200K. Whose sidewalks are we taking care of there? For me, what concerns me is that in Phase 1, a lot of the little stuff is done. The major roads aren't being considered until Phase 2. The major roads are where we're going to put all these greenways. So it seems backwards to me. It seems to me that in Phase 1, we should do roads full on. If this passes, because you can't put a greenway on a road, really, on our major roads until you own them. You can't put a greenway on Waxhaw Marvin at 45 miles an hour when people are doing 60 miles an hour. If we own the roads, then we can say whatever we want that speed limit to be, 35, 25, whatever. There's a great appeal to me about owning the roads solely for that reason, is that we have control and we can mitigate who travels our roads and how fast they travel our roads.
So Jill, I'm sorry, you must not have heard me earlier. The Phase 1 roads are going to be neighborhood roads and some of the connector roads. The Phase 2 roads are going to be the other connector roads. Yes, Waxhaw
Right, the major roads.
Hold on, let me finish. The reason that it's going to be difficult for us to do that is because we're going to have to go to like 25 different landowners and get an SR3 form filled out. I'm not saying that we're not going to start that if the bonds do pass right away, trying to get those forms filled out. But if that property turns over, then and it sells, then we have to go out and get another SR3 form filled out. So it is going to be a process in order for us to do that. I'm not saying that we're not going to start trying to do those right away, but that's probably not going to be Phase 1 because we're just not going to be able to get all of that legwork done with the staff that we have.
So I understand what you're saying about getting property owners. I'm one of a potential property owner. My point is that the major roads are the major concern. The major connector roads, Newtown, Waxhaw Marvin, Bonds Grove, they're the major concern for me.
Right.
So if you're not doing that until 2028, you're likely going to be utilizing DOT right-of-way or road right-of-way for many of these paths. That's my question, is why wouldn't we go after all the roads first?
So to do what you're saying, we would basically have to take over that road from the county and Waxhaw if they own it, or the state, which means now we're on the hook for a full $5 million to do that roundabout. Okay, so we're looking, that's what they projected to us. It's going to cost $5 million. The county came in and they gave all the funds they had available, $500,000, I believe it was, and then we matched it. Now, if you're saying you want to control when things happen, that would mean we'd
No,
have.
no, I'm
we'd have
not
to
talking
take-
about the roundabout
Hold
at
on,
all.
Hold on, let me finish. We'd have to take over ownership to control when things happen. We don't want to do that because it's going to happen anyways. Unfortunately, it's going to happen before they widen Providence Road. But if that all comes on us, then the bond should be a lot more, because they've already projected that roundabout right there with easements and everything, if we did it ourselves versus the state and the county, it's going to be close to 5 million. Am I right?
So you're saying, let me clarify what I'm hearing. You're saying that if we take over Bonds Grove, Waxhaw Marvin, that we will be responsible for the entire amount of the construction of the roundabout?
If you want to control when it gets done, yes. Okay, I'm going to say it.
Yeah, and one thing also, you're also involving Waxhaw, because Waxhaw actually has properties on Bonds Grove Church Road as well. So it wouldn't just be the county and.
Yeah, but originally, when you're saying what you're going to do with the roads portion of the bond, you're talking about taking over connector roads, major connector roads, right? And that's not coming in until phase 2, and that's my point, is that from my perspective as a resident, well, that's what I've heard out of council meetings. We're facing, the tranches are dedicated towards certain things.
I'm just wondering, though, why would we want to take them over sooner?
Because I want that speed limit down, and that's the only reason I would vote for this. That's my controlling speed. I would think that we want, this portion's going to get likely taken care of in that first tranche, right?
Yeah.
This portion in front of the Village Hall, sidewalks are going to be repaired. We're going to have all sorts of little things that are done, and we don't know how much all that is going to cost. So by the time it gets to the major roads, I'm just wondering, we're hearing that these are inflated numbers. We have no idea to what extent they're inflated. Is it 5? Is it 10? Is it 25% inflated? They were done in 2020 for the Greenway, so we're already there's a lot of questions here, and I listen closely to the meeting, so I have probably more specific questions, and that is one, if it precludes doing the roundabout, I mean, if it means, okay, we're just going to have to do that second phase because we take over Bonds Grove, we take over Waxhaw Marvin, then we're on the hook for the roundabout. I see that point. I understand that. Is that the reason for that phase? Is that the reason for those connectors? My point about the greenways, you've got greenways on these major roads. So if we don't own the roads, isn't it easier to own the road first and put a greenway down it than it is?
Mr. Mayor, I can answer that if you want me to answer.
So that's my question.
DOT, the reason that we have phase 1 and phase 2 has nothing to do with anything as far as priorities. It's basically DOT's willingness to give us those roads. So when we say low-hanging fruit, it's a lot of the roads that don't have issues with jurisdictional issues. There's several roads that, like Waxhaw Marvin, for instance, half of the road could be in Marvin, half of it could be in unincorporated Union County. There's a couple of houses that are not in Marvin. So you basically, when you drive down the road, you're in Marvin, you're not in Marvin. You're in Marvin, you're not in Marvin. You could be on Marvin on one side of the road and then in unincorporated on the other side of the road. So DOT is not willing to give us those roads until we have these specific forms signed off from the adjacent property owners that say, hey, we understand DOT maintains these now. We're okay if Marvin maintains those roads. So it's a little bit of courting in a sense of, I don't want to say annexation, but it's kind of giving the vibe of annexation to people because they want to make sure that we're going to maintain the roads to a certain standard. And so when they say phase 2 roads, it's just because DOT is not willing to relinquish those roads at this point in time until those things are accomplished. We've already received a letter from NCDOT that we're calling phase 1, and that's those low-hanging fruit roads because there's no problems with them. And most of those are residential roads, your neighborhood being one of them. The connector road to your neighborhood is not, obviously, because of the issues that lead up to your road. The connector roads that are in phase 1, if I can remember off the top of my head, consist of Newtown Road, because it's all in Marvin, Marvin School Road to the for the most part, if I remember correctly, Joe Carr and I believe Marvin Road. All the Phase 1 roads are listed somewhere in some correspondence, but I also have a letter from DOT that outlines all of those roads in a nice, pretty chart and itemizes them out. So if you want me to send that to you, I'll be more than glad to.
So correct me if I'm wrong, and this may be another reason why DOT does it this way. If you had your way, Jill, and we purchased that property and all that, and we own that road, then comes the widening of 16. They have to do that road first, and they now have no control. They would probably look at us as, can Marvin perform and spend the $5 million? Where are we going to get that money from? Those are things that they pace themselves. I think they want to be a part of it. They've already committed it through CRTPO. It became a critical intersection, so it is on the radar. Why not have the state, county, and us participate with it? I'd love to see Waxhaw in there too. And get that roundabout where we're not putting that $5 million bogey on us. We're putting 1/10 of it, or maybe a little more, to participate. But they're going to want to know that that can be done when that widening finally happens on that, because they have to have an avenue. And if it's our town owning it, and we're looking at, okay, we would probably have to raise to get to 5 million. Remember I said 1 penny equals $160,000. Do the math on that to get to $5 million. It's a lot of pennies. And it just doesn't make any sense. So I think they look at that, why they phase things. It's frustrating for us too. They'll give us every excuse, from COVID to hurricanes to you name it. It is the gas tax that affects this, not a state tax. I've heard some members they just want to blow up how the DOT does their work right now and how they decide things. It's very frustrating, especially on this end. But we're doing what we can, taking control of what we can.
And I'll just note real quick to that, so semi-piggybacking off of what he said, there are federal fund dollars that we utilize whenever we implement major projects like a roundabout. The Meadowlark roundabout, the Marvin Road, Newtown Road roundabout was funded with federal dollars, state dollars, and local dollars, obviously. A lot of the projects that we do have kind of a combination of that. In order to qualify for a federal funding, we have to have roads on the federal aid list, federal aid route, I should say. And if those roads aren't on there, they obviously don't qualify for that federal funding. But there's also mixtures of state funding that can play into these bigger projects. So when we have a project with a combination of efforts, we want to make sure that all parties are at the table so that we're kind of floating the least amount of bill that we possibly can on those bigger projects.
Thank you for that. That makes sense. What I hear you saying makes sense. I don't want to be on the hook for $5 million for a roundabout that we can participate. If that is why we're not taking over those roads, or a reason why, I guess that's okay. I just want it done sooner rather than later.
We all do.
Yeah.
We all do. And now, just so you know, the new Waxhaw mayor, he has to sit in that corner trying to get out, because that's his way out. We're trying to figure out how we can get officers there to slow things down. We're trying everything before
I know
the roads happen. So it's so frustrating, because there's jurisdiction issues that come up. The county doesn't want to do it because they said it's too dangerous. So.
Thank you.
Questions?
Let the fun continue. A couple questions, or a couple comments before I get started on this one. I appreciate the council's transparency, and I will give you guys kudos for having coffee with council and trying to be transparent, and I do appreciate that. You guys are working hard to make that happen, so thank you for making that happen. Just gentleman's question was, don't give me a problem without a solution. That's a fair comment. So I go back to, and I don't want to play Monday morning quarterback here a little bit, but I'm not sure if it's incredibly smart or incredibly stupid to put $20 million together as opposed to just a road bond. That would kind of make sense to me, but I guess we'll see what happens in the election. But if the bond passes, money will be spent, that's fine. If it doesn't pass, what are we going to do? It's a fair question. And I'm not looking for an answer here, I'm just throwing out ideas. Can we give the roads back to DOT?
I'm going to ask you one back.
Let me finish.
Would you want to give them back? Because right
That's a
now, I
good
can go
point.
back to that thing, you got to remember, that score's at 22. Those scores, there's not one of those scores that I think I remember, I could be wrong, that was above 70, and they're not going back to them.
Yeah, Jane, I'm not looking to debate that point right now. I'm just
But-
raising,
but-
I'm just
but-
raising
But
the
it's
question.
part of
It
it.
is,
that a
but that's the
possibility?
but that's a valid concern. That's why we're doing this.
Oh, I understand.
Because we could have, as a council, said, you know what? I know these roads are an issue, we're not going to address them. And then somewhere down the line, someone's going to say, what are we doing? Again, I'm going to go back to all these other communities, and that's just a small list of municipalities, cities throughout the state of North Carolina that are prudent in their vision of going, I can't look at this today. I got to look at it 5, 10, 15 years down the road. And in this case, it's 20 years down the road.
Yeah, like I said, I
How do
appreciate that.
we address it?
It's a great point. I tell you, I was surprised how many towns are actually part of the PAL program. I had no idea. There's a lot of communities in North Carolina that are part of that. So I just asked the question.
Sure.
Don't have the answer to that, but that's one point.
I think I do have an answer to that too, because one of the things that the state is not doing anymore that they used to is when a subdivision is done, the state used to take over those roads. But at this point, the state isn't taking over those roads. They're making them keep them. And that kind of shows you the fact they, the state, as much as they can, other than major highways, doesn't want to be in the local roads business because they just don't have the resources for it.
Short answer, we can't give them back.
So I'll say real fast, Mr. Rose actually asked me this question earlier this week, and I have sent a letter to DOT asking him that question. I have not gotten an answer back, but I will say, inside of giving the roads back, if that's an option that Council wanted to consider, we would have to return all PAL bill dollars, and so that pretty much halts any road projects that we have into play at this point. The roundabout that everyone's talking about, so that is an opportunity. We would have to give those funds back.
Okay, all great points. So, all right, that's one idea, give the roads back. Number two is, we're basing a lot of our decisions, whether it's the Heritage District, whether it's quarter-acre lots, whether it's bonds, on a survey from 2019, 5 years ago. I think we had 300 and some odd respondents. Maybe it's time for a new survey. Like I say, it's been 5 years. Let's do a new survey, see what people want. Just an idea.
Gary, I think that's a great idea. Do you want to head up that committee for us?
No, Kim, I don't work for the town.
Well, we have lots of volunteers.
Okay.
I'm just asking you the
I think
question.
we have paid staff to do that, so no, I would
We-
not like to do that.
Okay, so you don't want to be on a committee to
I'm
help?
throwing out suggestions
Okay.
for you.
Okay, just checking. Thank
Okay,
you.
Thanks for checking. Appreciate that. At last week's council meeting, the annual audit came back. Kudos to the town, or to the village. The auditor said a lot of good things. We're good spot. So I looked at the audit. So as of June 30th last year, the town's got $4.3 million cash. Now, some of it's restricted for future projects, $1.4 million. So the town's sitting on $2.9 million of cash. Now, I know there's formulas involved here, and I won't bore you with the details. But the short story is there is cash available to spend on projects. Now, as a former CFO, I'm not advocating to spend all that cash. But my point is, there is cash for projects. So I just asked the town or the village to look at that. There is cash in the bank, unallocated cash, to spend for projects.
And again, we're looking at projects, the ones we can take on because of the cash you think we have to carry a certain fund balance to
I
be
don't
at
think
the.
we have
the
it. We have
Alva-
it, Joe.
But, okay, so that being said, throw out the project and what can you get for, what do you want to bring out of that 4 million we have? Well, you want to bring 2 million? What are you going to do for that 2 million? Can you get economies of scale? Can you get DOT to move their trucks? Because we don't have a roads department. What are you going to get for that $2 million? And keep in mind, every penny we go up, we're going to add only $160,000 to our bucket.
Great point, Joe. Like I said, I'm not here to debate. I'm here to say, here's potential options, here's things for the town to think about. There is money available for these kind of projects.
Gary, I can assure you, and again, that's one of the things that, as we've gone through all of these, that the assumption is we kind of threw this together. We didn't throw this together. This is something we've been talking about and discussing all of the options around it for years. And we've got a financial consultant that said, here are the numbers and here's the reality of it. And and listen, I can play with numbers. I can look at numbers and go, God, we have $4 million. But if we go to, let's say we just dip into that and we start doing irresponsible things with funding.
Nope, I'm not asking you to do that, and you wouldn't do that either, which I appreciate.
Wouldn't do, but Gary, all I'm saying is, you have funds. We're not going to do things that are unethical or irresponsible. But I'm saying, once you start breaking down those numbers, when it goes back to our bond credit rating and the financial stability, when we go to the LGC to go, hey, you know what, we want to do this again, and they go, yeah, but you know what, you tried to knock these two projects out. Now you're not in the financial position to really get the good credit rating or the interest rate that you're doing. I mean, you've got a finance background.
Councilman Lyon.
And I guess my last point would be
Hang on one second, if you don't mind. I just want to answer something for them. I'm sorry, Mr. Rose. Just to remind you, we've got the audit pulled up, and I just want to, I don't know if, I'm sure you guys are aware of this, but we have received a $1.7 million grant for a sidewalk project from CRTPO. We've also received the $500,000 or $1 million project that we're going to be having at Village Hall. We're currently sitting at $1.8 million in unassigned fund balance. So I would be just cautious, you guys, to make sure we're not dipping into below that, because we do have to front those two grant projects. They're reimbursement grants that total roughly $2 million, actually 2.7 if I'm calculating that correctly, that we have to front that before we're reimbursed. So we would have a cash flow issue if you dip too much into that fund balance. Just wanted to.
I tell you, I appreciate that, and obviously, the latest information I had was an audit with $2.9 million. Now it's $1.4 million. Obviously, I didn't have access to the information. I appreciate that. The last point I would do is we have a wish list of a bond. Once again, if it goes through, that's fine. If it does not go through, I would do a bond for what people want. I mean, Jamie's comment, one bite at the apple, that's not true. We can go back for another bite at the apple. It's going to cost us money. It might not be November, but I come back with a bond that people want. And I think people want the road bond. That's $4.3 million, not $20 million. Those are my ideas. I just throw them out to you.
I got you, Gary. I've been doing this a short time. And if I said to Kim's, what is your thing, save the dogs? Yep. Half of this community would say, what about the cats? We do our very best to take in all ideas, and that's why we have Coffee with Council. And I appreciate you coming in and doing Coffee with Council. And we certainly want all the information we possibly can. And that's why I said it's important that there are three rails. Because you got the LGC, and you've got the community to say, you know what, this is something, because we're open about it. We tell you what we're doing and what we're working on. We don't go to closed session and figure it all out and then come back and just make a 15-minute meeting. This is all open and transparent. So you have the ability to come back in and say, you know what, there's concerns about that. We want that. Every council meeting that we come in here, we invite people to come in. You got 3 minutes to speak. I don't like that, but that's what we have to do because we can't do a dialogue. But that's why we have the Coffee with Council. We have the other town hall meetings. We have all of this stuff. So we're trying to do the very best we can to give you something, a vehicle that has something in it for everybody. And as I said before, I respect your decision. If it's no, I thoroughly respect it because there's a reason. And in your mind, it's a valid reason, and if I couldn't change it, I just want you to be able to make an informed decision on what you're doing and not a decision off of what you hear and what's posted out there on Nextdoor and social media and that and such. So if there's something, we're just doing the best we can with this. And
And
That's what we can do.
And there's another guardrail there too, which is in 2 years from now, half this council and the mayor are going to be up for election again. And that's probably going to be before the second tranche is ever taken. So, you know, if the GO bonds do pass, hold us accountable. Come to the meetings. Make sure that we're prioritizing the things that you folks want as the residents in general, because you're going to have that opportunity again in a couple of years to change the course of it even.
Gary, I have a question for you. We're here to do one thing. We give you information. We're not asking you to vote yes. We're not asking you to vote no. But you want everybody to vote no and not give everybody the opportunity. We're trying to give everybody the opportunity to ask all the questions they want to get the information they need. And we went around to all the neighborhoods, as some of these people know, and sat down for 1 hour, 2 hours, 3 hours, and talked to them and answered all their questions. Maybe not satisfactory, but we've answered them to the best of our ability and the knowledge we have. Some of this is not speculation, but it goes forth. We know where we have to be at this time, and where in the future we're not sure of. But we make a guess on it to where we be able to achieve what we're trying to do.
Gary, if you
And I
can.
tell you, I appreciate that, and I started that comment. I appreciate the council's transparency of that. I also tell you, for me, it's just the facts. Like my little spiel 3 minutes earlier, it was just facts. It was facts. You know, I'm a CFO, past CPA, so I just deal with the facts. You may disagree with what I say, but I just give the facts. Just the facts. Why is that? Because you're using incorrect numbers. Why do you say that? Give me an example. Give it to me in writing.
Gary.
What's in writing?
Gary.
What's in writing? Okay.
They're telling you what they do. They're telling you how it's done. They're giving you the worst case scenario.
I
have to give you the worst case scenario.
I'll go back to my earlier comment. When has any legislative body not spent all the money they had available to them?
Well, we haven't spent the money in the bank that you just told us that we should go spend, so no, we haven't spent all the money.
I said that's an option. If you have a blank check, you're going to write the check.
And this current council, to Jamie's point, when we had projects that we thought were unreasonable, even though they were a lot smaller, Andy, myself, Jamie, we were doing it ourselves. We were putting in the landscape lighting, doing to the point where now we have to sign waivers before we can work here. So we're trying to do everything. Our mind is in the right place. I finally have a council here that actually we're getting things done, and now we're trying to create opportunities and looking at the big picture, you know, to serve all, because it is kind of messed up when you're in Marvin, out of Marvin, and how you connect that. That's not our fault, but we're trying to make the best of what we have and how we can get there. And it's sort of a math problem if you look at it. If you tell me I'm going to pay 10 cents and I'm going to get opportunity to access 20 million, or pay 10 cents and only get $160,000, the economies of scale from a business standpoint are there. And you're going to be able to accomplish a lot more by saying, okay, we want to capture this pocket of what the first tranche and what we want to do.
I appreciate what the council does. I mean, I really do. You guys you do a great job, and you probably just disagree on this point. Taxes, spending, debt. I'm against it. You guys are for it. That's okay. To Jamie's point, you may just agree to disagree, and the votes fall.
All we're here is trying to inform everyone on the issue.
And I'm doing the same thing.
Okay, thanks, Gary. Does anybody else have any other questions? Nope. All right.
We want to thank everyone.
We have to adjourn the
Council
meeting.
and staff, thank you for being a part of this, and each one of you, and those that are on the Zoom call, we want to thank you for being a part of that. Again, we're going to continue to do this, and I know I will, and there's all the other council members offer up. If there's a group of people that just have somehow have missed this and want the opportunity to ask questions and see this presentation, please let staff know, and we will do whatever we can to coordinate that and get it on the schedule. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Jamie.
And thank you all for coming. We
Yes,
appreciate your
thanks.
time tonight.
And with that, I'll need a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion passes.
Do you notice the indentations? I think it's from Julie's meeting.
Hey, Kim? Yeah. What I want to know is how many indentations he's got in his ankles.
Yeah, had a few today.